right. Well, first I want to say it's really great to see such a really nice turnout to this event. So welcome, everybody. My name is Dr. Jennifer Ellis, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Guelph. And actually, my area of research is animal systems modeling. So we do a lot of modeling. So you might be asking yourself already, why is she hosting this? And I'll tell that story in a slide or two. But essentially, I think you've seen our program for today. The theme of this event today is really that GRIP, or Getting Research into Practice, is a team sport, right? And so I think we've got a really nice lineup of speakers from kind of all of those different team members. And I think it will lead to a really great discussion, kind of seeing this collective goal of getting research into practice from many different angles. So we've got people from Elora, from nutrition companies, from research perspective, commodity groups and producers. And we'll have a really nice panel discussion after lunch, kind of on really dairy focused, but how people have come together to accomplish getting research into practice from kind of an example of the dairy industry. So I think we have a really nice lineup there. Just to tell you a little bit about where this symposium series has come from, and also how my involvement came to be in this. Actually, my involvement came because Elora, a number of years ago, initiated the early career mentorship program for faculty. And I was in the first cohort of early career faculty that joined this mentorship program. And through that, got connected with Mike McMorris and Jean Howden. And we saw opportunity to kind of, work at expanding and enriching that mentorship program, but also developing additional content to help early career researchers. So after that experience in the mentorship program, we got some after KTT plan funding for a project that we called 360 Degrees KTT. And the objective of this project was really to facilitate knowledge transfer between industry and academia in particular for the early career researchers. And we had three kind of sub-objectives in that. One was to work towards expanding that mentorship program. The second was to facilitate knowledge transfer via the development of digital content. And so this was also in the era of COVID. So interviewing researchers who've been successful at GRIP and interviewing producers, essentially to get their information and perspective on pinch points and challenges and where they would like to see innovation developing. And the third piece of this was actually running these events, the GRIP Roundtable. So this is actually the third year in a row that we've run one of these events to essentially get all you people together to talk about what's working and what's not working, and hopefully to forge some new collaborations as well. This is just a bit of a slide. If you're not familiar with the Elora Early Career Researcher Mentorship Program, these are some of the outings and programs and sessions in place, really getting people connected to the industry groups, talking about funding and also KTT funding, and looking at different modes of success. So I think it was a really great program, so I encourage anybody who's interested in it, reach out to Elora. They also started the Elora Early Career Researcher Award to essentially serve as seed funding for early career researchers to start innovative programs that are fostering collaborations and cross-disciplinary approaches to solving problems. These slides can be available afterwards too as well. But in terms of some of the digital content that we developed, we did a 10-episode podcast series, which is available on the Elora website, also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And we interviewed 10 researchers across industry and academia, really on their experiences being successful in research and getting their research applied in practice. For the producer interviews, there's 24 episode series. It's on the Elora website. It's also on the Elora YouTube channel as well. So I believe we got essentially all sectors or commodity groups in across dairy, beef, wine, layers, etc. And so there's a really nice series of discussions with producers there about pinch points, their ideas for innovation, etc. So those links are there as well. And I think it's a nice resource for researchers, but also great potential for teaching resource as well. The Group Symposium, so as I said, this is the third time that we've run this. These are some of the speaker lineups that we had in 2022 and 2023. One of the big outcomes from 2022 was, this idea that actually most researchers are not trained in communications or in KTT, but this is a part of our job, right? And so in 2023, we actually brought in the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science for a workshop in the afternoon. Not sure who here might have been there for that. This was a really nice afternoon activity for all of us. So that project ended, and of course we were looking for what next. So this current group symposium is actually funded by the Food from Flat program at the University of Guelph. So we've got funding essentially to host some events and do some activities over the next year across 2024 and 2025. And our goal in this was really to help facilitate knowledge transfer between researchers and different industry groups. And so our goals are really to continue hosting this event, right? To get everybody together, talking about this, developing innovative ideas. We ran with this idea of skills development. So in the last group roundtable, we put all the communication workshop in the afternoon. This year, we're actually teasing it apart into two events. So in the winter, we'll run a KTT skills workshop. This is still getting ironed out, but the idea for this one is really AI as the new partner in GRIP. So how can we use new technology to help us communicate science better? So stay tuned for more information on that. And then the third point, because this proposal is hosted in the Department of Animal Biosciences, is to really support researchers in the Animal Biosciences Department with knowledge mobilization. So we've got a great grad student on the project, Kristen Lutz, who's helping us writing popular science articles and doing researcher interviews and researcher profiles and things like this to try to talk more really about what we're doing. So I think that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to pass it off to Kelly in a minute, but thank you guys very much for being here. It's great to see a nice full room. Feel free to use the digital content that we've developed as a result of these projects. And if you've got great GRIP ideas through the course of today, there's papers on the table there, and just jot it down. If you guys don't know Kelly, Somerville is the new appointed since September 2024 CEO of Elora, the Livestock Research Innovation Corporation. Kelly is a University of Guelph animal science grad with an extensive background in beef industry, as well as hosting or holding past roles with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture and Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association. She also co-owns a small herd of purebred Angus cattle. She's fully committed to driving research as a key element of the livestock innovation cycle and also helping get research into practice. I'll pass it over to you, Kelly.
All right, thanks so much for the introduction, Jen. Yeah, as Jen mentioned, I'm new to the role of CEO of Elora, and I'm glad she mentioned that, because hopefully that gives me a little bit of grace so I can play my new card for any mistakes here today, but certainly really pleased to be here. I'd like to just ask, has anybody in the audience been to a group roundtable event before that Elora hosted? Okay, so you guys are already ahead of me, because this is my very first one with Elora, so I'm pretty excited to be here. And as Jen mentioned, I previously worked with OFA and Soil and Crop. Very pleased to have some of my former colleagues from both those organizations here. Definitely, hopefully didn't burn too many bridges there. I'm going to just give a bit of a background on the history of extension and how we ended up with GRIP. So a couple of the things we're going to be talking about today under this theme of group being a team sport. So who Elric is, what we do, a little bit of the history and evolution, that's the company's extension, what GRIP is, why we do it, and what Elric is doing about it. And bonus points if you can recognize that all-star team in the picture. That's from one of my very favorite shows. So who Elric is. So to start, this is a Venn diagram that I actually stole directly from my former boss, Mike McMorris, who's here. And it's the cleanest, easiest way to explain where Elric fits. It's a funny little organization, and it's really unique to the innovation system. We imagine we've got these three big sectors with industry, academia, and government, where they cross over in that middle space is where Elric operates. So we do a lot of connecting, a lot of bridging between these groups. There's different cultures and languages associated with each of them. I think even coming in this morning, somebody made the comment, in a room this diverse, AI can mean a lot of different things. So depending, you should really establish that. It can be a little awkward. But this is the list of all of our members. So Elric is pleased to have all of the Ontario commodity groups as members. We also have some affiliates involved in that ag ecosystem for innovation, and we are pleased to have ex officios representing University of Guelph and OMAPA on our board as well. So that provides a lot of great insight and a great starting point. So our role. Because we represent commodity groups, it's important to recognize that these groups do some fantastic work, but they're inundated day in and day out with a lot of crises and constantly coming up with new problems that they have to address day out. So where Elric is a little bit removed from that, we have the privilege of being able to foresight a little bit further out, really look at that kind of 3 to 5 year scope, what's coming down the pipeline. We have some external working committees with our International Research Advisory Committee, IRAC, and our Emerging Trends and Opportunities Committee, ETOC, which has, if you ever want to, if you're bored, want to kill a few minutes, hop on our website and look at the people making up those committees. It's a really impressive lineup, and we have some truly valuable insight that comes out of that. We also do a lot of work building those connections, doing a lot of networking at events like this, bringing people together from across the space, because we really do, at the end of the day, one of the big philosophies at Elric is that it all comes down to people. We provide research services, so we help with research priority setting for members, and we provide a cross-sector livestock research document to the ministry every year. And of course, GRIP is a big part of what we do, and we dabble in the commercialization space as well. Where does the extension start? Full disclosure, this is all past history that's been told to me by others. I was not in the workforce in the 90s. And so this is coming from where we were, where there was a kind of formalized extension service that was provincially delivered. And unfortunately, through budget cuts, that really all but disappeared as that formalized service. Extension still is an internationally recognized term. It's still used elsewhere, and we still have extension, but what we're going to talk about is how that's evolved and what we call it today. Where extension, what it looks like elsewhere, it's still really big south of the border. This is just to give a couple stats for some scope here. And the North American Agriculture Advisory Network, NAN, actually has identified extension as an area deserving investment, and that's something that the Canadian Ag Minister sits on. So it is seen as a big priority here. And for a bit of perspective, Virginia State University alone has 240 extension staff, and they have access to over 100 extension offices in the state alone. Obviously, that's not something that we have or can build in Canada or specifically in Ontario. It's not really realistic for us, but they also have some great stats on the return that's generated from research and development in agriculture, and estimate that's even higher for extension. That brings us to KTT, KMKE. Other than an alphabet soup, this actually translates into knowledge translation and transfer, which is the newer term adopted for essentially extension. And it's a term that's used by OMAPA. It's actually built into the alliance, so that's the agreement between OMAPA and the University of Guelph. So for Tier 1 funding, there is actually KTT components for all of those research proposals. And there's actually separate calls around KTT, which Adam is going to discuss later. So there's the definition for it, and then we also have knowledge mobilization, which is essentially used interchangeably with KTT. It's favored by the University of Guelph and some of the federal government levels. But essentially KTT and KM are fairly similar in terms of scope for our purposes today. Then we bring to knowledge exchange. So this is a new one. This was brought up at our IRAC in-person meeting at the end of September. And I just there's consideration for yet another term, but what I find really interesting about this knowledge exchange idea is it really highlights that it's not knowledge transfer coming from one person to another. It is a two-way street between researchers and our end user that we want to adopt this technology, being the farmer. That information has to flow both ways and has to be accepted and encouraged. Where we're at now, like we mentioned, this extension gap has somewhat been filled, but it's not as formalized, it's not as structured as it used to be at one time. We have these parties that have followed money essentially because they're private entities. That's what they have to do to survive. So we have a bit of discrepancy when we're looking at a livestock lens between commodity groups of who has more access to these services than others. We have this meeting for researchers to get on farm, engage with producers, and producers to engage researchers as well. I think every time we do a farm tour and we get researchers onto a farm, they're always shocked at how much producers want to talk to them and vice versa. And so it seems to constantly be this new idea or this, and it's great to see that it's being realized, but it takes getting on farm to get to that point and establish those relationships. That brings us to GRIP, getting research into practice. So it's the reason that we're all here today, and it's a term that Elric coined to move past that language debate around KTT, KM, and everything else. And it's a bit of a more holistic approach to that idea of extension, right? Where KTT is typically built into the end of a project. The idea behind GRIP is that it's happening continuously. It's happening before a proposal is even submitted or conceived. It starts with engagement between producers and industry and researchers. And it can happen in a lot of different ways. We'll go over some of the GRIP products that are available. Jen touched on some of them that have already been put out as far as podcasts and all other kind of resources. So it can look like a lot of different things, but the main tenet being that it's something we do throughout the innovation process. It doesn't start or stop just at the end of a project. And it's embedded in that innovation system. Typically, we draw the innovation system as a linear path, but at Elric, we tend to imagine it as a cycle. Again, similar to the way we see GRIP, it's one thing feeds into another, and it's continuous. And one idea, as opposed to KTT, is that we really try to foster that cross-sector and cross-discipline approach. We recognize that not one person is going to solve it, which is why we're having a team event, because it takes everybody here. And a spoiler alert, that includes all of you. So we have this idea of GRIP being this pathway, it's a holistic approach, but we can't expect researchers alone to take this on. It's not realistic to be able to approach every producer in your sector. So we have people who act as these GRIP intermediaries, whether that's veterinarians or nutritionists or some of the Malpass specialists who can certainly help in this, but everybody plays a role to varying degree. And it's not everybody's area of interest. That's okay. We have a lot of keen people here today, and obviously you're here and engaged, and we encourage you to take on that GRIP role however you can within that research system. Jen already touched a little bit on our early career mentorship programs. This is what Elric is doing in the area of GRIP and to further that initiative. So I won't go into too much detail, but there is an early career research award associated with our mentorship program. So anybody who successfully completes that mentorship program then has the opportunity to apply for this award. And we have some really great partners on this in Grand River Ag Society, Western Fair District, OBC, and OAC. So we're really pleased to be able to offer that. And one thing that's a bit unique about this that really does highlight that GRIP component is that we're encouraging cross-sector research specifically, something to benefit livestock production as a whole. We also have our farming innovation tours. So this is an initiative that started last year. It's about getting, again, those three groups that we think, academia, industry, and government, get representatives from each of those on a bus, take them to a farm. We're standing in front of a manure spreader in this picture, not a glamorous picture, but it does come to the point of getting that dirt on your boots, we'll say. So the idea being they can foster networks amongst themselves, but also the reality is we're dealing with a population coming into the workforce who has less and less exposure to agriculture. So this is a great way to expose some of this realities of farming and just show that producers can be approachable and get a little bit of exposure into that, potentially coming from a different cross sector, a different commodity rather, or not being on farm at all. We also have our Engineering a Better Farm initiative, and bonus points if anyone can identify the person in the room who's in this picture. So this was taken at a tour when we took our IRAC group to the University of Waterloo under our Engineering a Better Farm initiative. So it came about recognizing that there's a lot of potential in engineering, a lot of solutions that already exist that maybe haven't migrated to agriculture and specifically to livestock. So we went out to all of the producers that we have across different commodities. We asked them, what are some challenges you have that engineering solutions might be able to solve? And they gave us this really great list. We compiled it, broke it down by commodity and by area, and then we shopped it out to the University of Guelph Engineering, Waterloo, Windsor, and really just tried to engage those engineering faculties in livestock. And so we have some great ideas. There's going to be some exciting stuff happening in this area. But this was actually delivered to like a broad range of engineers, but really we actually brought it to our annual symposium in June. So anybody who's there might recognize it. And we had Mary Wells from the University of Waterloo speak to it. And for a bit of perspective, Waterloo has over 1,800 first-year undergraduate engineering students and a faculty of over, I think it's 240. Like, it's wild, the facilities and faculty that they have access to. And they're generating some phenomenal research which can be applied pretty easily to livestock production. It's just about getting livestock in front of these people. So that's another way that we're just forwarding when it comes to Albert's initiatives. We have a couple of great products. I won't go into a ton of detail. Jen touched on them already. They're available on our website. It's something that's ongoing, and we're always looking to build that out. And so certainly, if you ever have opportunity or are looking to collaborate on that, we'd encourage you to reach out. And that is all. So thank you very much, everyone.
Adam Meyer, he's the manager of the Research and Knowledge Management Unit at the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness, where he leads policy and program design to drive impactful change in the agriculture sector through research and innovation. With over 15 years at Malpass and a background in business development and a broad range of program delivery, Adam brings a wealth of experience in crafting strategic initiatives that support Ontario's agriculture, innovation, and growth. He's passionate about fostering collaborative partnerships and advancing practical solutions for the sector. So welcome, Adam.
Well, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Kelly, for having me. I was humbled that you thought that I could speak from I think the agenda said the perspective of government. And I don't know that I can do that, but what I'll give is a perspective from government today. It'll be largely from my role, which is working within our research and innovation branch at the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Agribusiness. And I'm so impressed that our new acronym is on the slides. People have caught on to that. A renewed emphasis on agribusiness. So thank you to Elora for encouraging us to take a little bit of a different perspective, to think about KTT and GRIP as a team sport. I'm going to really lean into this today. I really encourage you to, I mentioned I'm going to be giving my perspective from the Research and Innovation branch. There's a host of my colleagues here today that are spread out very nicely, well done, from policy and program and our specialists and some folks from my team. And be sure to interact with them on the breaks. So in Elmira 2 nights ago, my niece was playing a game of hockey, and I grabbed a few photos, and I'm going to leverage these pictures because we've been encouraged to think about KTT as a team sport. I'm not a hockey expert. My kids play saxophone. They don't play hockey. You don't have to know anything about hockey to get something out of this, I hope. So Kelly and I are going to hopefully just reemphasize a number of things that Kelly touched on when she was speaking just a moment ago. She's defined KTT very well, really about driving the application of research to deliver real world impacts to support better decisions, and really recognizing that the non-linear aspect of how KTT works. From a government perspective, I'm really excited that that we have a 10-year strategy in place at OMAFA that is called the Grow Ontario Strategy. Check it out. KTT is marbled throughout the whole thing. And I think you'll understand that term that I've just used. It really is supported by OMAFA's investment annually, approximately $70 million a year in the research and innovation space, much of which KTT is embedded in all of these program components. I love your wheel, Kelly. Kelly? But I used a hockey puck because we've got a team angle on this today. You could use the soccer ball. So driving knowledge into use in action really then requires us to promote awareness of those successes, and then feeds back into the knowledge creation component of this process that Kelly has described. The process is not static, it's not linear, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. But this is happening across the sector, throughout the sector, in a way that has actually benefited from our evolving KTT model. I use the word optimizing KTT, but what I'm trying to say here is that our ministry has recognized that the approach to KTT has changed over time. And so we've been very open to evolving our model, the definition, broadening that, and trying to keep up with the fact that new ways of doing things, that's the whole point. And that we need to reflect that in how we approach the business as well. So my team made a new visual for me, and I really appreciated that. And then I ruined it by turning it into a hockey rink. So that was not hard for me to do though. But when you create a model, you know, you have the opportunity to put yourself at the center of it. So I did that. But if you skate out to the middle of the ice and you look around, often we refer to this as an ecosystem. And so to Elric, I really appreciate the perspective of switching that to team. Ecosystem sounds pretty complex. Team is a way to think about it that makes a lot more sense, I think. So yes, it's sure you could describe it as a complex ecosystem, but each of us has a role in a team. And I think that's the right way to think about it. The ice in the background here, and for those that don't know hockey, the ice is the stuff that's all around everywhere. That's the research users, and they're everywhere. And to really challenge this nonlinear approach, we need to recognize that the users of the results of research are all throughout this very neat and very diverse team. I'm also really thankful that we have a rich team that is extremely diverse in Ontario. I know, Kelly, you mentioned that our scope and scale may not be the size or the magnitude of certain American models, but it is a solid team. And I think we certainly punch above our weight class. So I'm going to lean into this team sport approach a little bit more. There's an approach to effective teams or dysfunctional teams it's by an author named Patrick Lencioni. The model is over 20 years old, but it stood the test of time and it's basic enough that I understand it. So I'm going to use it. And his approach on effective teams is really looking at it from a dysfunctional angle, where teams that are not functional don't have trust. They're afraid of conflict. They lack commitment. They avoid being accountable. And they're not really attentive to results. And we can look at some of these principles about the foundations of effective teams, I think, from a KTT lens. And so I'm going to give some thoughts on OMAFA's role through the lens of KTT under the principles of effective teamwork. And it starts with trust. And this has been a neat way. So thanks again, Kelly, for encouraging me to think about our KTT work in the approach of teamwork. So in teams, trust is the confidence amongst team members that their peers' intentions are good. And KTT, trust truly is that cornerstone for effective collaboration between the parties we've been talking about today. But I think when it comes to trust from a government perspective, we've taken some steps, I think, to build that trust. And it's a process. Trust takes time to build. But it's really the foundation of some long-term partnerships. A big part of that is our approach to partnerships with folks like Elric, but the University of Guelph, but consistently developing programs that foster partnerships. Increasing transparency is a big part of building trust too. We developed a new portal to share and give access to the public to all the research that we are investing in. Our new Lafley program has been out for a couple of years, so I can't call it new, but you'll see in a couple of slides how building partnerships has been really, really important through driving approaches to address our diverse sector needs. I need to also really emphasize, probably one of the most important points from the government perspective is the role that our specialists play. They are relational people. They do their work through like relationships, and that is our longest standing program in Omafra that is completely founded in trust. So I think it's appropriate that trust is the first piece to talk about. When I walked into the meeting today, I was feeling a little hesitant about using a horticultural and field crop example in a livestock room, but then I was really validated when I walked past the table and I heard someone mention the Agribusiness working group just a few minutes ago. I'm like, okay, I feel good about this. So this is an example of trust really in an organic way. It's a model that began with a couple people talking, industry, someone had some neat ideas, and about innovating robots and creating a relationship with someone in our ministry to then build this out into a working group that has now 150 members that has worked on 20 robots with 6 different technology companies and is continuing to blossom. The secured funding started with a very small relationship built on trust. So it's a really cool model. You can find tons about it online. I'm not going to spend a lot more time on it, but I think the foundation of trust was extremely important in this piece, in this story, being successful. I think there's certainly a lesson to learn there. And these things best happen when they happen organically. The second is conflict. And this is something that none of us like. I tend to want to run away from that, but we have to recognize that this is a very diverse sector. Even if you're in a room with folks focused on livestock, it's still really diverse. And we have to recognize that if you have trust, then you can have those discussions that are tough. You can have active and open conflict, and we can recognize too that we do need unique solutions. It's not a one size fits all. We need to create that space for differing views. From a government perspective, we've tried to design our programs that reflect that. So one example is our KTT program at the University of Guelph that actually has a stream that focuses on understanding the new approaches to KTT and knowledge transfer, recognizing that there are hard to reach audiences. There are some challenges that are not addressed in the same way. And so this program to date, since 2008, has funded over 150 projects with about $10 million invested. It continues to evolve. And stay tuned for the next round of funding here. That date will be available soon. I did want to comment on, make a point here too. Speaking about the diversity of our sector, Kelly was speaking to the University of Waterloo's talent being brought to bear around our complex challenges in the agri-food sector. We're doing that also with our OAFRI program. And the takeaway for this slide here is that there's a tremendous amount of human capital and capacity across this province in Ontario that want to look at the agri-food sector as a place to play, to bring their skills, knowledge, experience, and capacity, sometimes technical skills and infrastructure, to address the challenges for the agri-food sector. And from in a relatively small call that we did, take a look at the diversity of the organizations that are stepping forward to say, we want to be a part of bringing KTT solutions to the table. This is really encouraging. The third piece I want to talk to is about commitment. In the research innovation space, things take time. Think about a breeding program, think about studying animal genetics, for example. Being committed and being able to be dedicated to something over time, that's a big deal. And I hope that, certainly hope when you examine our role in this space that you can see that. I think it's really important to also communicate what you're doing and what you are committed to, but even more so demonstrating it. Some of the Malpass commitments that I want to touch on. I've already mentioned our team of industry-facing specialists. That is a big commitment. Our KTT partnerships also form quite a substantial commitment. I'll also highlight our relationship with the Vineland Research Innovation Corporation as well in that space, in addition to working with Elora. Our commitment with funding over time, certainly something I've touched on, but I really appreciated Kelly mentioning the fact that KTT needs to be embedded in all of our projects and all of our investments, and that's something that we are committed to doing. I've already mentioned our Grow Ontario strategy, so I'm not going to talk about that much more. And I'm also going to touch on our infrastructure commitments in a moment. Oh, that moment is now. So, building the platform and investing in the platforms for research and innovation, where that KTT opportunity can be generated and those partnerships can happen, and those teams can come together, certainly is a commitment. And these commitments are because of industry coming together and saying, we want to be a part of this. It's government having the vision and the leadership through an agency that has a recently refreshed or modernized mandate for the future. And also the researchers and industry that comes up and steps up into investing in this. And this is, I think, a commitment that all of Ontario should be extremely proud of. Accountability is something I wanted to touch on too. I think this is an important part of the model, ensuring that we take responsibility for the things that we say that we are going to do. For government, I think I can't not think big picture. We want to see the betterment of Ontario, the growth of the sector, the long-term sustainability. This comes down to public trust, assurance systems, but also the opportunity to creating that climate, the investment climate where businesses want to come here, grow here, and see that we're doing that in a sustainable way for the next generation. We have an accountability to direct our investments, every project, to be able to ensure that it is advancing the public good. Not all of our research and investments are going to be completely aligned with public interest, and I think that's well recognized. But we have a big responsibility to also tell the story, to report on what we're achieving, and that's something that in government we need your help with. We can't do that on our own, and I hope that that's a theme that we touch on a bit today. Telling that story of long-term impact. So I mentioned previously that KTT is a part of every funded proposal, but we have a range of tools to recognize that, programming tools to recognize that not all KTT happens right at the end of a project, a research project, as Kelly was mentioning, but it does form a key part of our evaluation process of the risks we're willing to take, the types of projects that we want to support, and also reflects the range of different programs we have to support what I would call applied research. Results is huge. This is a focus on delivering results, but also being able to tell the story around results. So we want to be able to celebrate our successes. I touched on this a little bit. We need to work together on this. It's not something that we can do alone in government. We are taking some steps to put a renewed emphasis on this with my team. So we have under the Sustainable Canadian Agriculture Partnership, you're going to be seeing us telling a bit more of the story of the projects that we've invested in, to not only shine a spotlight on those that are innovating, those that we hope will benefit from the new knowledge, but also to highlight the value of those partnerships and to draw in interest in our programs as well at the same time. So this is really about storytelling, but first of all, of course, achieving results and demonstrating the efficacy of our KTT programs. In our KTT Alliance programs that I mentioned previously, about a third of those have a direct connection to the livestock sector. So that should be heartening for this room. There's a host and a range of different ways in which we've advanced in the KTT space. I'm not going to read everything on the screen here, but everything from biosecurity to precision feeding and many points in between, covering across many different areas of the sector, from aquaculture to alternative livestock, right? So it covers the whole range, and really proud of this long-term sustained commitment And of course, there's tons online if you want to explore that program a bit more. I'm going to throw up one example, and this is there's a couple points I want to make here. So this is an example really looking at a challenge in the dairy industry that goes back to well, a very long time, back to the early 90s, addressing high immune response and the development of a genetic test to reduce the incidence of disease. And we talked about commitment, but also it's important to tell the story around results. And here's an example where you have patents being filed where, as a result of work that's been done before that, up to 1992, but a 20-year pathway to commercialization of an incredible technology that's led to over $130 million of value to the industry and adoption across more than 80 countries. We need to be telling stories like this together. And sometimes it's not an example that where we see the results even in our career time frame. And we need to have that continuity to be able to tell the story. We need to work together to bring these really good examples forward where it is working. I just want to wrap up by talking about funding. Everyone's always excited about funding. I'm excited about funding because my team developed this program and they brought some really good ideas forward, some learnings from our previous round of funding under the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. This is the current framework agreement with the federal government. They've been wonderful partners to help us put together programs like this. I'm going to revert back to a linear model, so I have the awareness to know I use the non-linear model at the beginning. This program really supports applied research and development of new technologies, the ability to demonstrate and pilot those new technologies, and to bring commercialization opportunities further towards the market. Through that, we have a KTT program. It is currently open and open till early January. So this is under the Elora program. Malpass is delivering it. There is a KTT stream that's open. I'm proud to say that it has the broadest opportunity of any of our KT programs we've ever had. The definition of KTT, the opportunities across the sector. So I encourage you to look at that. We've got a broad eligibility too, who can come and bring solutions to bear. So do take a look at that program. It complements other programming that's currently open and available. That is what I am highlighting today. So I'll just encourage you as I wrap up here. Thank you for the idea of looking at a team approach. I think it's really great. I'll move away from the complex ecosystem. So who are you building trust with? You embrace healthy conflict? Are you demonstrating a sustained commitment? Are you communicating what you're committed to? And to whom are you accountable? And are you attentive to results? So thank you very much.
So, I gave all of our speakers this invitation to, essentially, I reached out and said, can you write down a few words on how you'd like to be introduced? And the problem with doing that when somebody is not only a colleague, but also a friend, is they take a lot of liberties of how they want to be introduced. So Mark Malpass challenged me to actually read what he sent me. And I was like, I'm going to do it, Mark. So I have the honor of now introducing Dr. Mark Malpass. I once kidnapped his stuffed chicken from his office when we were co-workers many years ago. And then I left ransom notes around the building for him. For this, I'm truly not sorry. He does, however, have a large wealth of other experiences from around the world at making science real and has a lot of collaborations going on with a number of institutions globally. So unfortunately, I had to invite him to speak to us today again. More seriously, Dr. Malpass is now the Director of Nutrition and Innovation at Masterfeeds, and he's going to give us a commercial perspective on getting nutrition for us. If I did it, Mark.
So when the placeholder came out, there's anyone who knows me who knows what the next slide is going to be, because I am not going to resist the opportunity to put some hockey on thing. Now, you might be looking at this, thinking to yourself, Team GB against Team Canada in the World Championships. That's going to be the shortest video in YouTube history, right? but it's not. No, that the reason I put this on is to talk about language. If I said to you today, I got in a car, I went to fill up the fuel, I put petrol in it, I drove to the chemist, went to buy some vitamins, that then I went to put in the boot, and then I drove here, right? You all sort of understand what I'm saying. But if I say, this morning I went to the gas station and filled up the fuel, I went to the pharmacy, I bought some vitamins, which I put in the trunk, and then I drove here. None of you have to translate it in, yeah? You all sort of know it. Now, moving to Canada, I had to actually start to use these different pronunciations. But there's a really important part of this because language matters. And when we're talking in science, we all too often forget with our industry partners that they might not be afraid up to date with the latest terms. We can get lost in jargon and acronyms and whatever. So my appeal is to think about the language you're using and use it very carefully. I mean, there is one, which is aluminium, right? Which is the right way of saying it, right? And that's actually that's a really good thing because when we want to stress the words that we want to use, we can use that for dramatic effect to really push home the subject. Now, when I was looking at this, of course, I found this photo, which I find amazing, because we've got Conor Bedard looking like what on earth has just happened to me. And we've got Ivan Osi, who's one of my coaches a few years ago, looking like he just won the lottery. And you would not know that the result was the other way around. You know, I mean, for Team GB, that is a result, let's be clear. But appearances can be deceiving, can't they? Now, we've already talked about teams, and teams have to be a mixture of people. And we've obviously in a hockey team, we've got netminders, we've got forwards or whatever, and we bring a variety of skills. And on that photo, and there's some bearded guy over on the left-hand side there, that's the National Ice Hockey Rink in Nottingham in the UK last summer. And there's a variety of people. There's actually the captain of Team GB here. And why was he in that? He was there as one of the coaches. And there's actually my 3-year-old daughter at the time, Mackenzie here. There can't be too many 3-year-olds that have been playing hockey on 2 different continents, I'm guessing. So, you know, that's why was she there? She was there, this is day 3, 2 hours at a time on these training camps. Yeah, she got on the ice the last 15 minutes of day 3 to bring the energy into the room, to try and re-motivate everybody and push them to the end. Yeah, we had guys skating over so they could pass the puck with her as she's shuffling around on a little balanced skates. Yeah? Everyone has a purpose in the team. You don't want a team, in my experience, teams, you don't want them to be too big, to be really successful, really impactful. Everyone's got to have a role. And sometimes the most important thing is to bring the energy to the room. Now, I'm not, in all of this, talking about language and whatever, I'm not talking about dumbing anything down. You know, the people that you'll be collaborating with in industry are not necessarily stupid people. They just don't have the familiarity with the terms that we use. So it's just about making the things accessible. I love this thing, the complex but right versus simple but wrong. Yeah, isn't that a metaphor for life? Now, in addition to this, we sometimes have to ask ourselves why. And that's Dr. Malpass, and that's the clever Dr. Malpass in our family, okay? And as we've already worked out, this is trouble, okay? Now, when Dr. Malpass and I were dating, we had a number of very quiet moments in our conversations. And one of the really uncomfortable silences in one of our dates was when I asked her, why are you doing your research? Now, my PhD could be written on the back of an envelope by comparison to Sarah's. Sarah did really proper science. She looked at conitase enzymes, she looked at seedling generation, she overexpressed that gene in different yeasts, she did X-ray crystallography of it, she did all sorts of really whiz-bang stuff, yeah? And then I asked her why, and she didn't know. She had no idea why she was doing it. Eventually, she said to me, well, knowledge capture. But neither her nor a supervisor had ever thought why they were doing that. All too often. And don't get me wrong, that initial research is important. That initial knowledge capture is important. We do need to push boundaries, but we should at least have an idea of why we're doing these things from time to time. As I said, we ask different questions like that, sort of why are we doing this research? But we can ask other sort of questions, and as teams, we shouldn't be afraid to ask those things. So one of the ones that I've asked many times over the years is, if it works, will it work? It sounds a stupid question to ask, but it never stops me doing it. And by that, I mean, if the science part works, will it work in practice? Like in the feed industry, will it actually make will it actually go into the food? Will it make a cube, make a pellet? You know, those are some things that are really important. I was involved in one piece of research with the University of Nottingham, and before my involvement in the project, they had this amazing thing that they found some like really astonishing impacts on microorganisms. But could we get it to stick in a pellet? No, not a chance. If that had been thought about at the very beginning of the project, we would have had a very different outcome to that. I've been very fortunate in my career to be mentored by all sorts of people, and one in particular is the head, before he retired, he was the head of Cargill in the UK, he was the most senior Cargill employee in the UK. And I was once sat on a boat having a beer with him actually, and I said to him, "Man, well, if you learn one thing at the start of your career, what involved, what would it be?" And he said it's about the trust equation. So I was amazed that Adam talked about trust as well. It's really hard to find that. And with the trust equation, for anyone who hasn't come across it, is this: it's about how credible you are, how reliable you are, how close you are to people, but all over self-interest. The thing about teams is, why are people wanting to be involved in a team? The minute that somebody thinks that someone's in a team just for their own self-fulfillment, that erodes that team spirit. That trust equation is so key to success. And excuse me. This is not just about teams, and this is I've used this throughout my career. Yeah, know who you're talking to, and in terms of that, like, how do they like to be communicated? So at my first job in the UK, the big company in the UK I worked for, one of the things I worked out very quickly was how the boss of the company liked to be communicated to. And I did that from a book that my father gave us. It was actually built, it was written, I checked it the other day, it was written in 1989, before some of these communication things were even thought about, which takes it. But the principle behind it still thinks. Some people prefer face-to-face, some prefer emails. I hate emails, for example. They get lost in my inbox. If you ever want to really communicate me and get my attention, don't email. Bad thing to do. Pick up the phone, speak to me, that sort of thing. That works. Texts are really good for someone like me. And there's a variety of different things. And to think about who you're communicating with and what makes them tick, or how they respond, is really key to this. So it's not just the language we use, it's how we do it as well. This thing about bullet points versus a paragraph of things versus prose. Different people have different views on that. Some people don't like bullet points, they prefer them. Other people are quick and they just want to say your points to summarize for them. So that's really important. So, and then the other thing is as scientists, we quite have to know quite a lot about our little subject. And we're really enthusiastic about it. We want to talk all the time about it. But how much do people really need to know of what you know? Do they want to drink beer, or would they rather have a shot of whiskey? That's the question, isn't it? And so as working within teams, that getting the right balance in that is really important. And so on that note, I'll use one of my favorite quotations, which is, "Never miss a good chance to shut up." And thank you. And does anyone have any questions, please?
Yeah, Mike.
I think one of the evolutions in GRIP KTT extension is that the team has changed and gotten bigger, but it's not really clear who all's on the team. So especially in today's environment, trust seems short in supply. Looking forward, how would you, just use this room as an example, how do you get people together to trust each other? How do you build that trust, which was #1 step in having this pyramid?
Yeah, that comes with time. It's got to be genuine. It cannot be fake trust. You can't manufacture it. It's got to be developed organically, in my experience. So you, as a manager, I try and create environments where that trust can build and foster. How can we put people together, not so we force them together, but they want to be together and want to work together. And I think that there's no magic wand to wave on that. It's all about, let's develop naturally. Far more impactful when it's natural. Charlotte?
I love the, do they like beer or whiskey? And until I take you drinking, I would never know, Mark. My question to you is, when you say you need to know how much they need to know, how can I assess that before I present or meet with the group?
When it's the first time, tough, really tough. But as a team gets to know, you can, so start off light and then turn the volume slowly. That'd be my suggestion. Because if people want to know more, they quite often ask questions, particularly if you've got the right environment and then people feel they can ask questions.
I have a question, unless somebody else did.
I have a question. So when you're in the team for a while and you realize that the team may not have the right members, how best do you go about modifying that topic?
I'd love to know. I'm thinking how to reply to this without actually saying what's going through my head. Does anyone know who Sir Alex Ferguson is? The ex-Manchester United football manager, and he was asked by somebody about how did he have a team that functioned really well not just a championship winning team, but a dynasty. Yeah. And Sir Alex Ferguson said, get rid of the and we'll delete that, it's tweeted. That's part of it. You know, but it's not easy to do. It sure as anything isn't easy to do. You can try and minimize the impact of your terrorists in the team, that's for sure. And sometimes I've been in a team where you have to take that difficult decision and get rid of it as a terrorist in there. They're sort of setting the whole team dynamic. But it ain't easy. It really isn't easy. Brilliant question.
Sorry, so I'm a journalist with Ontario, and quite often when I'm dealing with researchers or industry experts, much like you said about the language, how challenging is it for a researcher to understand when they're presenting what the language level needs to be? Because my solution is quite often, can you explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old with an extensive vocabulary? You know, so I can write the big words, but you need to make it so I can share that with my general public.
Yeah.
But when, you know, like as a researcher, I don't know what the transition may be or what maybe solutions are there to help them remember, you know, not everybody is on that level of
Yeah,
understanding.
I think it depends on the publication, doesn't it? And if we're writing for a local newspaper, it might be very different to especially it's in industry magazine. It's about trying to use the terms that are used within that community. And so for researchers, try and learn them, try and use events like this and to talk to people who are in industry and try and use that as like a test bed to try and find out some of those terms. Don't be afraid to ask us as well. Not everybody comes from a farming background, you know, and not everyone knows the difference between a gimmer and a wether in terms of sheep. Farming itself has all sorts of acronyms and weird uses of language. So it's about trying to do the best to try and get the scientific world and the agricultural world to sort of combine.
I don't know if this is so much of a question for you, but maybe something for us all to think about, because I find that I appreciate the metaphor of the team, but I'm not sure if we know what the game is that we're playing, and we're being told we're all on the same team together, and it is about like advancing agriculture, but I'm not always sure that we have the same shared vision. I think we're all playing like a bunch of different games.
Yeah.
And it is harder for us to know, how you put the right team together. Like often our knowledge mobilization teams are actually quite small groups that, and we have like a specific thing we're trying to move forward, but together, like if we're a team together, what's the goal? What game are we playing?
Yeah, that's a great thought. I think, a lot of researchers want publications, and a lot of industry wants to keep knowledge proprietary. That's a real difficult game, because that's not the same purpose. And yet we both want to find out knowledge. There can be conflicts in that, but the self-interest part is more, that can be just on the table and discussed open. You have that sort of level of transparency, that actually helps with trust, doesn't it? Nobody thinks I'm doing something as an ulterior motive. It's not straightforward, and it's a really good point to raise to the room. With one more?
I think an add-on comment to that, my first thought is, isn't the whole purpose about competitiveness for the country and productivity, and maybe it's a bit financial and gain? So I think it's a really important question, and sometimes we're driven so much by where the funding opportunities are, right? Whether it's revenue generation or public funding to motivate us. And so I think it's a really good question. I think we have to tie it back to the people side again. So maybe just take this opportunity to say thank you for hosting this. It's been fascinating already. We've only been here for a couple of hours, not even, sorry, 1 hour, 2 hours. But I appreciate that question, Melissa, because we are asked to think about being on a team. Really, what is the motivator? And we're told it's competitiveness, but what does that mean? How do you get everybody moving in the same direction? So we're told this. That's the environment, it's the people. So let's just, if we can get more agreement on where we're all headed, that feels valuable.
I think people have to share a purpose on a team, the end goal needs to be shared, but the rationale and motivation for doing it doesn't have to always be perfectly aligned. Not everybody needs to be around sustainability. Some people could be on efficiency, which actually is the same outcome, for example. But as long as that's talked about, that helps with the trust. So, okay. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, so I think we're going to get started again. So our next speaker is actually not in Ontario at the moment. So Dr. Anna-Kate Schaubler is going to join us from online. So Kate Schaubler is a professor and champion pet food chair in canine and feline nutrition, physiology, and metabolism at the University of Guelph, and a research leadership chair. She runs an active research and teaching program focused on dog and cat nutrition, and continues to grow the impact of her laboratory on the Canadian and global pet food industry. She also has a very rich history in industry as well. So Kate, can I turn it over to you?
Great. Thank you very much, Jen. And thanks everyone for taking the time to start really thinking about how we can collaboratively push forward to continue to innovate in our industries. And of course, the application of research that we do is very critically important. So thank you very much for allowing me to come and share my journey with you a little bit and how I perceive this topic. Just a second. Okay, there we go. Okay. So I always think of the entire innovation process as a continuum, but also as an opportunity that we can look for potential collaborations with industry. And so right at the very top, is this idea of coming forward with a high-level technical problem. And I work with the pet food industry. We're a commercial product, unlike a lot of the application of animal nutrition we do. I also have to think about it going on shelves in stores. And so not only do I tend to work with different parts of the industry, and so not just pet food manufacturers, but ingredient suppliers, retailers, government, and in a lot of cases also non-governmental organizations who are key opinion leaders as it comes to the health and well-being of dogs and cats. And so I will get the right people in the room when we're had this high-level technical problem definition. And then depending on who those people are, we will define and explore that problem together until we're ready to move it through and look for money for it, execute it, and deliver it in the longer term. So I'm going to give you one example of what that looks like today. So when I think about the steps that I have to take to get a application of research recognized by government and industry, because I work in a highly regulated industry as well, the first thing that's important is that everything has to be data driven. And so one really great reason to have the scientists and the academics on the team, if you are part of the industry and you're thinking about doing your work yourself, is that we bring the data and the way that we disseminate data, and we make sure that it's in an open and transparent environment. We make sure we have all the approvals that are necessary. And we will also bring this idea of, oh, wait, this isn't actually a validated method. So let's start out at the beginning with just method validation. So one area that I work on is amino acid requirements. And this is the very first paper that we published where we moved a methodology from other animals into the dog, and we are now doing this work in the cat. And it was really important for us to make sure that this was in the literature because it defined our ability to use it going forward. But I had to explain the validity of this to industry, that we really needed this first piece to keep to set the foundation. Now, after that, then industry was prepared to start applying and replicating that work or that methodology in subsequent work. And from there, my laboratory and now other laboratories are applying this methodology to determine amino acid requirements. But once again, this is kind of a feel-good thing for the industry. Great, we have a better target for tryptophan in this case in diets for dogs. But what does that mean to my diet innovation? How do I think about that? Why is it important that I balance this amino acid? And so then it comes to really working with industry, especially around potential claims. And that's where you have kind of clinical efficacy that you want to demonstrate. And in this case, we looked at the tryptophan requirement. We went at the tryptophan requirement. We balanced it for its ratio with other amino acids that it competes with. And we looked at, well, what will that do? And we demonstrated that it improves serotonin status, it improves stool quality and in fecal metabolites, and it did not do anything to the body composition through the training period, which was really important for, in this case, endurance performance dogs. Not only did we make sure we published this in a scientific journal, but we also made sure that we presented it at the International Symposium of Energy and Protein. And then the student who led that work, James Templeman, who is now in the pet food industry, and a master's student, Eve Robinson, we also went to a really cool little conference where we talked to about 40 mushers on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And we talked to them about our work and how we can optimize diets. And this led to a series of opportunities for my laboratory to be involved in sled dog nutrition. Now, it doesn't just stop there, though. it also is important to remember, I gave you an idea about the mushers, who are the sled dog owners, but we also have to understand how our work is interpreted by the very end user. So if you're an animal ag, that means, okay, so I've done this research on beef. How does that affect the steak that is on the plate? How does it cook? How does it taste? What do consumers think about that? And that's all very important as well. And you can do that with really good surveys. But I'm going to tell you, you should really, really make sure that you collaborate with economists on this. They're very good at understanding consumer habits and insights. And we have we have an opportunity, and this is going to include government, industry, and the academics, but we're trying to understand how consumers will view claims on dog food labels around protein, which would be a huge step change and really help to inform the consumer to a greater extent. Now, coming back to this, I've given you all components of this. I'll remind you that at that high level, when you're defining that technical problem and refining it, once you've refined it, you can generate a hypothesis, design your study, and you can get money from places like NSERC. And I only use NSERC as one example. Many of us, we use the NSERC Alliance program, which is a industry matching opportunity to get NSERC to support this research and continue to innovate in our sectors. From after all of the research is done and written, it is the academic counterparts like myself and Jen, and I unfortunately saw Mike Steele there for a second. We are all really good at making sure that we get our science out into the broad scientific community, which means that we also go through the peer review process. But we also then make sure that we go to the appropriate conferences in our sector. So I use a couple here. I'm currently at the Pet Food Association of Canada doing exactly what I'm talking about. I'll have students and postdocs go to the AFIA Pet Food Conference in January, and I'll go to Pet Food Forum in May, so we can translate a lot of our science. But one thing that's really important, and this is how I'm an ENTJ, and for sure, for those of you who know me, I do kind of see myself like that. But it takes a lot of energy, motivation, and persistence. So whoever is leading these things does need to have those traits in order to get research into practice. But there's also other opportunities when we're thinking about bringing research into practice. And I think the best opportunity here, and something that for sure the University of Guelph is really, really committed to, is experiential learning. And for those of you who don't know, we now have a MSc with a potential intern at the end rather than research. And this is really going to help us collaborate more closely with the industry and make sure that we are producing students that can help to translate the research that we're doing to your companies and continue to help you to innovate. That's not saying that there isn't other opportunities for us to work collaboratively and use those students in an internship program. And I have one example where I have recently set up an internship program with Champion Pet Foods with funding from my tax and NSERC. And of course, this also really helps to increase the accessibility to learning for all students. So if your academic partner that you're working with has an international student and they don't have the same opportunities to maybe go to conferences, for example, in the United States, there are these global research awards as well from my tax. And so I have a PhD student right now who is going to go work with one of the best metabolic modelers in the world, not saying anything about Jen and John, who I think are also some of the best mathematical modelers in the world. But what a great opportunity for a PhD student to go and have the opportunity to work with another individual that complements the research that you're doing. And there's money available for you to do that as well. And then last but not least, I can't help but emphasize something that I've been really enjoying as one of the hosts of the Pet Food Science podcast. And this has helped me gain an ability to help others apply research into practice and help the pet food industry continue to innovate. For those of you in different parts of the animal sector, these are all Wisentech's podcasts, and they're available on any streaming podcast you like, and they span swine, beef, dairy, pet, and poultry. So with that, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions for Kate? Questions for Kate? Post coffee. Yeah,
Maybe.
And keep correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that we live in a world now where to a lot of people, pets are part of the family. So that's quite different than livestock generally, which the function there is to provide food and make a living from it. But how, have you seen examples where something that worked in pets was directly applicable to grip in livestock?
That's a great question, Mike. I think that if I was to pull one thing from pet that we do, I think almost a lot more than the ag industry at this stage is we have such a demand by the consumer to have more food, I'm going to say feed ingredients for agricultural animals. We have a lot of experience getting feed ingredient approvals through the FDA for an ingredient definition in AFCO to enable use in diets across North America. So that might be one. So we're pushing a lot of alternative ingredients through the pipeline right now. That at this stage, I think that would be the best example that I can think of. You bring up one other point in there, Mike, which is, and you've had me come and speak on this too, we do have to start being really sensitive to the work we're doing and the changes that we're making and whether society is accepting it or not. And so we do need that societal input. You can do that through survey. You can do it by engaging the community in terms of the work that you're working on as well. But I think that transparency will be critical in moving our sectors forward with societal support.
Kate, you mentioned a new master's degree that was out there, and I think I understood that it was for KTT development, but could you explain that more clearly?
So in the Ontario Ag College now, we don't just have a master's, so you all might have employees that would say that they did a master's by coursework. And then at the end of that, they would have written a major research paper. We know that not everyone is going into research. A lot of the time they're going into industry, and I think more now than ever before. And so it was a lot more practical to have an internship rather than a major research paper. And so what that really means is that we have an agreement. If you're a business owner, we might be sending a master student to work with you from May until August. And an intern, you have to report on their performance. Of course, you have to define what the work is that they're going to be doing. But this is an opportunity for you to teach people in a, first of all, it's experiential learning. So it's hands-on learning, but it also gives you, you get interns that could, for example, help you through the summer as an example, because they're usually going to be in the summertime. But it also allows you to see the HQP that are coming out of the University of Guelph. And that's especially relevant if you're thinking about hiring. Doesn't everybody want 4 months to take a look at a potential employee before you even actually hire them? That would be fantastic. So that's part of the internship program. And if you're interested in that as a business owner, I know, of course, Jen's standing, I can see her, and I know Mike Steele's there. And he's the graduate coordinator now, so he can field all the questions on that program for you all.
Great, yeah, one more question over there, yeah.
Hey, Dr. Schubler. I just wanted to ask a question in regards to whether any other universities have started to try and pick up on this master's by internship, or is this kind of something that's existing in a vacuum of the Department of Animal Biosciences here at the University of Guelph? Has there been any interest in other departments or in any other universities?
Well, for sure, the Wendy Pearson from our department led this, so she would have done a landscape analysis on this. But no, experiential learning is not new. Co-ops are not new, so it's kind of like a co-op, but not. There will be also, I think, greater co-op opportunities. So not at all. It is a moving target, actually. I would say that this is also generational. Gen Z appreciates that opportunity to have experiential learning, maybe even more than the generations that came before them. So we're not new. We're not new at all. It just took us a little bit of time to, well, frankly, do most of the paperwork.
Thank you so much.
Hey, any last questions, for Kate? Good, otherwise let's thank our speaker. Thanks so much, Kate.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate you joining in online as well, Kate.
No worries. Thank you, Jen. I'll see you tomorrow.
See you back in the office. Our next speaker is Dr. Angela Straathof. She is the Director of Research and Knowledge Transfer at the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association, a farmer member organization delivering agricultural programming. She oversees delivery of soil and crops on-farm research initiatives, connecting farmers with researchers and resources to test best management practices and support knowledge mobilization to those findings amongst the industry. Angie has a PhD in soil biology and chemistry from Wageningen University in the Netherlands, which is actually where I met Angie originally as well, and acted as the program director for soil and crop before taking on her current role on the formation of Soil and Crops Department of Research and Knowledge Transfer in 2023. So thanks, Angie. Come on up. I'm actually going to scoot over here due to a shoulder injury. Bear with me. Thanks. Thanks. I was actually just saying to Jen this morning, I feel like a bit of a livestock sector interloper in this room. I am a soil scientist, and soil and crops mandate is obviously right in our organizational name. But it's really important to get into rooms like this. And 2 years ago, I walked into a room. Admittedly, I slinked in kind of late, and I took the last available seat next to a guy named Mike Morris. And I'd never heard of Livestock Research Innovation Corporation before that moment, but Soil and Crops been working with them ever since. So get into rooms like this, form your teams, and go from there. It's great to be here. Thank you. I'm going to be talking about a bit of a case study for you all, the Living Lab Ontario Research Program. Within the Department of Research and Knowledge Transfer, this is kind of one of our flagship research programs. It's largest in breadth and scale, but it's delivered alongside other initiatives we have funded by the province or industry, including on-farm applied research and monitoring program, grassroots research grants that we offer exclusively to our local and regional associations. But also OAP grants underway, as Nada mentioned this morning. So yeah, lots to keep us on our toes, and Living Lab really complements all of those initiatives. So I'll just go through its kind of an overview today, and you can start to think about how its innovative model of co-development lends to getting research into practice. So what is a Living Lab? Specifically to the Living Lab we're delivering in Ontario, and as it's been conceptualized and funded by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada under the Ag Climate Solutions funding framework. A Living Lab is an innovation project implemented on farm, supported by research. And it's a way of developing farm innovations on beneficial management practices, best management practices, or innovative management practices, depending on the flavor of the day and who you're talking to. But essentially, it's a way to move the industry forward through iterative testing of management styles. It's a team sport. This is our team. These are our team players. It's a really complex ecosystem of partners, but we're really grateful for the buy-in and the support and the collaboration we've been able to draw on from all these folks. It's been said, many times already this morning, getting research into practice, it's about trust, it's about people, it's about relationships. On a slide up like this, these are just logos, but it's really about the people who come to the table from these organizations, bring their wisdom, bring their experience and their ideas and their connections to the farmers that we're integrating into the program. So it's really critical that we have everyone feeling engaged, feeling heard, and feeling like they're able to contribute their best selves to the program. So it's a really gratifying group of organizations we get to work with on Living Lab Ontario. Just kind of zooming out for a moment, like what is it most fundamentally trying to achieve? As it's funded by the Agricultural Climate Solutions framework, obviously there is a mandate to mitigate agriculture's impact on climate change and be part of the solution. So we're really looking at these practices listed here that are hypothesized to have potential to sequester carbon, and most specifically to sequester carbon into agricultural soils. So a lot of these are, they're not necessarily new in concept, but we want to drive the adoption rates of them and, kind of tweak their implementation strategies and center those implementation strategies so they're more accessible to a broader swath of farmers. And then second to that, second to the carbon sequestration piece is the priority to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So this is looking at more nitrous oxide and methane emissions in addition to carbon dioxide. So we'll be looking at these specific practices and directly measuring their ability to reduce the levels of those potent greenhouse gases that are being emitted from agricultural systems. Now, in addition to both of these main priorities, we're interested in looking at what we call the co-benefits of these management practices. So, if it does turn out that they're, measurably impactful for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and sequestering soil carbon, are they also able to provide biodiversity benefits, economic benefits? Do they enhance the social well-being or social fabric of the farming community? So all of those elements are kind of taken into consideration in peripheral or like side quest research projects that supplement these main priorities. This is just a kind of zoomed in snapshot of the sites. It is admittedly not the most current version of our sites because they do stretch actually all the way from Thunder Bay to the Temiskaming region as well. But we've really prioritized capturing regional diversity, commodity diversity, and kind of hand in hand with that comes along management style diversity, soil type spectrum. So the cooperators really critical to the success of the program, and important to emphasize that these research trials are all conducted on working farms operated by real farmers who have very generously and graciously opened their farm gates to the researchers engaged on the project. So we did a bit of a multi-pronged approach in selecting these sites and identifying the farmer cooperators. It was a bit of an open call, but again, coming back to the importance of the team contributions, we really relied on the partner organizations in the network of the program to call in cooperators, farmers that they thought would be successful hosts to these research trials. And they were invited to participate in a survey along with an open call for participants in the survey that would help us identify strong candidate sites. The geography and physical attributes of the site were really just one piece of the puzzle. We, also wanted some assurances that the farmer cooperators would be good ambassadors for the program. So again, do they, have comfort level, not only working with the researchers who they'll be welcoming to the farm, but sharing their story to other farmers and eventually the general public as well. So there's over 40 farmer cooperators in the program registered now. Obviously, with that number of farms, they're not a monolith. There's a real spectrum in their capacity for engagement, their interest level in engagement, their interest level in contributing to knowledge transfer. But we do really want to give them all the opportunity to have their story told and share the perspective of their experience participating in the research program. This is kind of the conceptual model of how Living Lab as a national program centers the co-development, and I'll get a bit more into what that refers to, but so it centers the co-development process of the innovation cycle. So the planning phase for Living Lab Ontario, again, was done very collaboratively. Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association had actually been engaged in delivering the pilot phase of Living Lab, which had a focus on water quality, beneficial outcomes, and a more constrained geography in southwestern Ontario. So we relied on lessons learned from that, but really opened up the number of partnerships and the types of practices we'd be looking at Living Lab continuing through to 2028. So at the moment, we're in this, kind of critical middle phase of co-development, with the end goal being obviously widespread adoption of these practices once we've been able to test them. So I'll zoom in on this cycle for a moment. So co-development is a process by which we identify needs and outcomes with the partners in the program and the farmer cooperators in the program to generate and share ideas, not only about how things are going, but where we want them to go. And then we implement that into the experiments and the data collection and the testing of those practices on their farm. And that leads us into this iterative cycle where we evaluate what's coming back from the testing phase. So I would say, and I can speak to our ability to compare how we conduct Living Lab and where we're able to kind of tweak and modify and revise the processes as we go through it. It is different, from a more fundamental research program where you really want constrained and consistent replicability and year-over-year comparisons. Here we're leaning into, more the opportunity to use this as a proof of concept model, as a demonstration model, and say like, okay, if we don't have that, if we don't have that scientific robustness, because we might be using this co-development to kind of tweak elements of the program, we're still getting the KTT benefit and the opportunity to like bring those farmer voices to the table and understand and center what works for them. So it is innovative in that regard for sure. Oh, no. Okay. So the core principles are really threefold, and again lends to this teamwork and this team sport mentality. We're centering the user, and the user being the farmer that's participating in the program. Hosting the trials is obviously the most fundamental user, but the end user being like the broader spectrum of farmers across the province, where we are going to be relying on the stories that come out of the program to share with a wider number of farmers and have that increased adoption rate. Working in partnership is really critical, and it's what makes that iterative co-development procedure really reliant on engaged partners. And of course, the core principle of the real life context being these are all conducted on working farms where, as we know, anything can happen. But these all come down to, and it's been said, I'm very grateful that I'm not introducing a new concept here. This all comes down to trust. The users have to feel like this centering of the voices. It's not just lip service. They're really engaged, and then the implementation of their advice and experience and feedback is really critical to maintaining and building that trust. The trust has to come from the partners as well. And again, knowing that in a real life context, anything can and will go sideways very quickly. You do have to have trust in those partners who are going to be responsive to the circumstances meeting them at that site. Okay. And that's what it all comes down to. And I'm not introducing a new concept. It's been mentioned already this morning, but between the trust and the relationships and the people that are engaged in these opportunities, that's most ultimately what gets research into practice. So we want to establish trust in a known entity. That's where we're really benefit soil and crop as an organization, but the farmer cooperators and the program as a whole really benefit from that complex consortium of partners, because if a farmer has never heard of Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association before, but they've been invited into the program through Dairy Farmers of Ontario or Ontario Sheep Farmers, and so they're kind of still having this inroads through a trusted entity. That's really important for their stepping stone into the program. Trust is also built iteratively. So when we go back to that co-development cycle and that innovation cycle, do they understand that their voices and their feedback are actually being respected and implemented? And then when it comes around again to that next phase of co-development, they're able to candidly and openly share again, because they know it will have a meaningful impact. And finally, it takes time. It takes a lot of time to build trust. And where soil and crop has benefited from being a key player among farmer members since 1939. Trust can also be broken a lot faster than that. So really maintaining those first 2 points. And understanding that, especially when you're new to a scene or the farmer cooperators are new, it doesn't happen overnight. And then finally, we trust from the researchers in the priorities of the program. So we work both with researchers from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, but also industry and the University of Guelph and the University of British Columbia. And we understand, and the programming partners understand that researchers have different priorities, different timelines that they operate on. And they're spread very thin, you know, in terms of their capacity to really, I find especially academic researchers like expected to be everything to everyone. You know, they're mentors to their grad students, they're teachers to their undergrad classes, and now they're increasingly expected to produce great KTT. So as much as we can help them, you know, understand that we respect their priorities as much as they understand and respect the priorities of this project is really important. We also benefit from a lot of trust from our partners in the process. A lot of the people around the table are new to participating in research, are new to working with soil and crop. So as much as we keep those channels of dialogue open and honest and collaborative, it builds that trust among all the partners in the process. And finally, we hope that farmers have trust in the outcomes of the program and the means to the end. They're building relationships with these researchers, they're building relationships with new partners. And of course, it all comes back to the time it'll take. I think this is my last slide, but really just want to drive home again, you know, the power of the team we've built here, and increasingly, like it's also a new sphere, admittedly, you know, for soil and crop to be working so intricately with the livestock sector and a lot of new partners on around the table here. So found it very gratifying, and I'm happy to be here this morning to share with you. Thanks.
Questions for Angie?
Thanks for the presentation. Introduce myself, Martin Jackal from the Canadian Center for Soil Group. So one question I had, you mentioned the industry and the problems that they might have. You mentioned the researchers, and then they focus or they use their expertise to solve that problem. But one other side of your story is always if a researcher has expertise in certain program that can solve a problem that exists, we usually need funding from the government for that specific problem. Do you, your organization or your industry, does it have any influence what kind of funding and what priority from the government is available? Because we know what's the problem and we have the researchers, there's no money, or there's not enough money to solve this problem.
Show of hands who is from the government. I'll just, okay. That's a wicked problem. I think so, you know, another, you know, maybe for those of you who aren't familiar with soil and crop either, like, you know, we're very decidedly a non-lobby organization. So where we're delivering these programs and facilitating these programs, we're able to, you know, relay the results and the outcomes of those back to the government funders who are supporting the program. They may use that data to influence policy or influence a future funding framework, but we deliver it neutrally, so to speak. So I think, and again, this is me, you know, speaking a little off the cuff, but I do think that's where a lot of soil and crops credibility in the landscape is built, because we, you know, we recognize the priority of the government. We try to meet farmers where they're at with those priorities coming through the funding that we do deliver, and you know, kind of take that middle road. But we don't lobby or petition for the funding priorities to change at the government level. Now, where the research outcomes, you know, can be used to inform policy, and where the outcomes of our, you know, programming uptake and demands for future programming, we can relay those to the government bodies that do make those decisions. You know, in that way, is there some influence for where future funding frameworks can divert resources? Maybe. I'm not sure I've answered your question, but it's
it can be a tricky line to toe.
Good questions?
Hi, Jala. It's a very fascinating presentation. I just, it's out of curiosity question. Like probably you know about farmer preschool approach that has been promoted globally by World Bank and United Nations, and also innovation platform. So is there a living lab approach that you're using here? Is it like different or you are some similarities?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's, the approach certainly draws from a lot of models. It was designed at the federal level, so and Canada was undoubtedly looking to other national and international initiatives where success could be drawn from and where there might have been some lessons learned. We saw the parallels in the provincial funding frameworks that we deliver in the on-farm applied research and monitoring program that we've been supporting for several years with funding from previously Canadian Agricultural Partnership and now Sustainable CAP. Yeah, they haven't necessarily reinvented a wheel here, but they've optimized the wheel and they're trying something new with it. And I think that's where, we have the ability, and even where co-development as a concept has the ability, is to even still, as the program progresses, learn from those international initiatives and say, where can we be kind of tweaking this process as it progresses.
Okay, thanks so much, Angie.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, our next speaker is Tom Lewis, as well as Charlotte Wong. Tom is the executive director at the Poultry Industry Council. He brings a variety of experiences from private, public, and government sectors to the PIC team. His focus at PIC is operations, board governance, and ensuring the PIC meets their strategic objectives and long-term goals to support the poultry sector. We're very cautious because we use the word commodity group to describe PIC, but we acknowledge that they're not a commodity group. But I'll let Tom talk more to that. But and I realized we didn't have a nicer introduction for you as well. But come on up, guys. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you.
So before we get started, I just want to thank Elric for the opportunity to speak here today. And RIP is a team sport. Charlotte and I were talking about this. So we're here 50% of the PIC team to present in the afternoon as a team. And some might say a small flock. So that being said, we make sure I hit the right button. So we're here to speak about research to practice and the role of PIC in the poultry farming. And thank you for the disclaimer that we are not a commodity group, although there is commodity group experience amongst the team. But I want to touch on some of the objectives, and defining the role of commodity groups in the poultry industry is something we're going to tackle. The importance of translating research into practical applications, identifying challenges and strategies for implementing research on farms, and highlight success cases or case studies where PIC facilitated practical applications.
So part of my intro would have been that I'm the knowledge translation specialist, and just doing what I'm doing, it's occurred to me today that we really should have called this building your team and winning the game, because it's really about collaboration and trust, and we've heard it over and over. We're not really bringing new topics to the table, but the question this morning of how do we know we're all playing the same game comes down to how do we agree that we win? So what is scoring that goal, and how is our team performing? And what is the success? So for us, it underlies in knowing your audience, and if possible, positioning research always as a pull from them, not pushing onto them, because then they take it up better. And, ultimately today, as Tom said, we're going to give you 3 examples of what we think the game was. And the score, the clock hasn't run out. So the score is decided, and we think we're winning, but that's open to debate and discussion as well. As has been said twice now, we're just gonna one more time reiterate that we are not a commodity group. So instead of reading words on the screen, which you can all do in your own time, I'm gonna bring it back to that hockey analogy. If I see the goalie out taking the face off, we have a problem here. Everybody has their role to play, and it's important, but I don't want to be playing someone else's role. I want to complement what they do. And so our position in this industry is more of being that neutral third party. We're neither the center, nor are we the goalie, but we play a role in that ice rink that Adam showed us this morning. And it's an important role, and what we do is a value, but really it's about knowing who the team around us is and how we can continue to complement our partners.
Thank you, Charlotte. And continuing on the theme of the role of PIC is to share information. Charlotte and I were speaking because hockey seemed to be a bit of a theme here today, which we weren't aware of. But PIC is more like the Zamboni driver, critical to keeping the game moving. I want to just touch on the 3 E's. So education, extension, and events. So for those who don't know, Poultry Industry Council is a registered charity that delivers poultry education through extension services, event coordination, project program management, extension by tailoring events and content and put relevant knowledge to work for industry, and events by offering non-biased opportunities for industry and producers to gather, and opportunities to share experiences and struggles while networking to create a strong and supportive system.
As you can see, we brought our diversity to the stage today. So my next one is going to be about the act of getting research into practice. And again, it's got to be a pull, not a push. So we have to know that what we're offering is a value. And in our sector, this typically comes in one of 3 views: efficient gains, sustainability, and economic viability. So here's the ultimate question. Why does that matter to PIC? Well, it's because we did our research. So the dollars and cents study done back in 2015 showed us that they know the top 25% propensity for continual learning results in the top 25% of your producers. And those are the ones that have that continual propensity for learning. We want to take that research out there, make it applicable, accessible, and meaningful to them on the farm. And why? Because when we move the bell curve from the bottom up and we continue to support the top and exceeding, the whole industry is going to move forward.
So I'm going to talk about nothing better than challenges. Challenges in research to practice. So number one, complexity of information. Often scientific research can be very technical. It can also present cost constraints or be seen as such. There can be adoption resistance. Farmers may hesitate to go with an unproven method or be seen as kind of the guinea pig. And 4, regional variability. So they need to be adapted to local conditions because what might fit in one area might not be relevant to another.
Well, thanks for the downer, Tom, but there is good news. So we acknowledge there are difficulties, but we've got solutions. So our strategies to really address these problems, just simplify that communication. And really make sure that when we're talking about winning the end game with producers, it's hands-on, it's farm level, it means something to them. But you can't just make it a one and done. Let's be honest here. There has to be ongoing support. If the trust isn't there and the relationship wasn't built, they're not going to reach out to me. if something needs to be fixed or updated in the future. And I need the collaboration. I need the feedback loop to complete so that not only do I know what I offered was of value, but it's still working and there's still value. All right, time for some examples. The Poultry Industry Council has a program for euthanasia. Now, this is a very sensitive topic, and unfortunately, there wasn't a designed method for training this out. What we did was make standards that acknowledge humane methods, and then we rolled it out. We talked to researchers, we talked to veterinarians, we talked to experts, we talked to the feather boards, we talked to the industry, we talked to the processors, anyone who would listen, because we're really good at talking. We talked to them, and we got the feedback, and we developed the tool, and then we took it to the farms. We used our partnership with the commodity boards to make sure that they all had equal access. And the commodity boards being Chicken Farmers Ontario, Egg Farmers Ontario, Turkey Farmers Ontario, and also Ontario Broiler Hatching, Egg and Chick Commission. Mighty fine 4 feather groups, and we love them all. But without their collaboration, this couldn't have gotten into as many farms as it was. And the outcome? I mean, it was great to collaborate with everyone, and that's a little feather in our cap, because I love another one, sorry. They won't stop. And we also found out that producers, the feedback loop from them was that now they had an actual method for training these tools, that they could check the boxes, they understood the pinch points, and they were confident in the methods that they were delivering.
And as Charlotte mentioned, since we like talking, we also do like listening. I just want to mention that as well. This case study also highlights the collaborating for GRIP with Elric. And this was getting research into practice, using PIC's platform to promote podcasts, to share information at a time that would be most convenient for producers or those interested in learning. The partnership was with PIC, the University of Guelph, Elric, and it produced 10-episode podcasts. That information is on our website. Collaborating with strong partners to share information with everybody who wants to hear from researchers about research and the research they're doing and the impact of that on farms.
And who doesn't want to hear from researchers? Let's be honest. We just gave them a little leverage on our platform. Now, we've talked a lot about industry, but occasionally we like to step outside the box. And disseminating information or telling the story along with partners such as ONAFA are also in our bailiwick. This is an example of Small Flock Ontario. It's a project initiative that we've undergone. And essentially during some highly zoonotic issues that may have occurred in the province, there was a small gap identified and there were resources needed. So PIC is the perfect platform to offer that extension. And we did what we do best. We talked to people. We built a little community. The small flock is a very different type of group because they are not necessarily dealing with commercial business interests. It's a much more personal space. So keeping in mind, what were we offering them? How were they going to use it? Because the poster I give you to post in your mudroom or in your space is very different than what I give you for an anteroom of a commercial farm. So we made it tailored to them, and the outcome has been an amazing biosecurity uptake by people who just had never heard of it before. So again, we used our voices and we spread our word.
And certainly the pandemic was certainly one way to get people familiar with biosecurity. In terms of not being a downer, I'm now going to speak on measuring success. So adoption rates, farms implementing methods and using common language to discuss issues and topics, performance metrics, impact result in humane services for the poultry industry and consistent training, feedback, relevant information, and continuous professional development. So nothing makes me happier than talking about the future. And as the new ED with Poultry Industry Council, we've certainly got some great opportunities for shifting our focus and adapting better to support the industry. That's going to include new delivery methods by expanding our online platforms for greater accessibility. This could be more podcasts or potentially self-guided online resources and learn at your own pace resources for producers and industry. Enhanced farmer involvement, providing content to farmers and producers for their needs, meeting their expectations, and delivering relevant and pertinent content. And an example of where that's been done most recently is making our producer days more species specific. In-person gatherings, continue to offer in-person opportunities to network, spread the word of mouth, and the benefit of learning, and targeting locations that match areas of production.
Okay, so in the spirit of getting on with this presentation, I'm going to bring it all home. We do have a few takeaway messages that I hope we shared with you, and if not, I'm going to say them again because that's translation. Essentially, everybody has their role in the ice. It's nice when we can play together, but I really don't want my forward spending too much time with my goalie. Okay, so we have to know where we do best and work together to collaboratively offer these things. We want to encourage all the collaboration between everyone who will speak to each other as humanly possible, because that is what we see as the way to support continuous improvement. Incremental it may be, but improvement will come out. And just as we've done today, plain language. If I can make it hands-on and ask you each to pick up a pen and write something down on the paper that Elric gave you today, just one idea. All we're asking for is one idea from every person in this room on that piece of paper they've provided you. But let's make it hands-on. And let's make sure that there is a need for the content that you suggest. And if you are wondering, you don't have to take my word for the fact that that's the secret to success. Because I earlier referenced the 2015 dollars and cents. They went back and did a 2020 update to this. And Farm Management Canada showed that there are 7 practices of Canada's top performing farms. And one of them is actively seeking and learning those skill development opportunities to meet challenges for the needs of the changing business. So everything is evolving at all times, and we as PIC are just phenomenally proud to have a space in that realm where we offer the unbiased opportunity for people to get together and talk about their problems and then sort it out to issues and ways to manage it.
Charlotte thought she was bringing it to close, but I'm going to talk about how the PIC does it best. Delivering helpful, unbiased information to all poultry commodities, supporting trends relevant to everyone, and delivering in an overreaching method. And I mentioned that before, the producer days in terms of shifting the focus on those podcasts, industry events, and things like the National Poultry Show. Remain flexible to deliver specific commodity needs and support the learning if needed. And again, that's another example of revamping the producer days as one, and working to speak with everyone, producers, commodity boards, veterinarians, input supplies, equipment supplies, and really anyone involved in the poultry industry. So that brings us to a close. And again, thank you, Albert, for having us here today. And thank you all for attending and listening.
It's team play. Tom is happy to take any questions. Don't worry, time's not limited. He's here all day. Question.
So you mentioned about your role, the PIC's role, and you mentioned different things. I'm just looking at it from the perspective of the general public. For example, for euthanasia, you talk to researchers, you talk to farmers, but I know that probably everybody in this room knows that there were some big news about what happened with the hybrid turkey, and I understand the public has a very strong opinion about that. Is your organization looks, for example, again, as a euthanasia, we are thinking like that. What does the general public think? I'll give you an example, like my son was asking me, Daddy, where is bacon coming from? I said, from pigs. He said, how? I said, yeah, we have to slaughter them. He said, why you are killing them? They are cute. I mean, like how people, especially young ones, are thinking and just wondering how is your organization considering the general public thinking.
Thank you for that question. I'm gonna be just straight to the facts, because I feel like I'm among friends here. So every industry is going to have portions of it that are more difficult for the general public to accept. That either they've not had the lived experience or they do not relate to the circumstance you're going through. And when we are talking general public, we have a much different approach. Euthanasia training is for industry because it is part of their role. If you were working in a factory, we would need to teach you how to stay safe around that equipment and how to manage when things are going wrong. Now, if you're a small flock producer, you have backyard chickens, my suggestion is not to be doing euthanasia yourself. My suggestion is to find a poultry veterinarian and to take your concerns to them, because this steps over into the realm of backyard building relationships, and they will treat them much more as a domestic pet. So just as I would encourage you to take your dog or cat to a veterinarian, I too would encourage you for your backyard flocks. Now, if you're a farmhand on a large livestock commercial operation, you have different standard operating procedures, and how the public perceives the businesses need to manage those issues is really for the public to decide. And my friends at Farm and Food Care do a fantastic job of lifting the veil and making it readily available to everyone about what is happening and all of the things we are proud that happen on these farms and humane, proper handling and welfare. I hope that's answered your question.
Oh, last question, no pressure. On your last slide, you just said that you guys engage with everyone and involved in the poultry industry. I'm just curious, do you ever seek to involve people who aren't directly involved in the poultry industry? And what strategies do you have for engaging those and cultivating those relationships?
That is a. Just a moment for the microphone stops. That is a very good question, and I'm almost gonna call that the gotcha moment, because, I'm gonna have to give that one some thought and actually get back to you, and if you wanna share the response with the rest of the team, in terms of how I respond to that. But that is a great question, and I'm gonna give that some meaningful thought.
I think in general, though, it's all the lessons we've heard today. Meet people where they're at, find that common understanding, and back to the beginning of where I started, determine your win. So we can all play on the same game, even if we're not in livestock. OSCIA, for example, who just did their presentation. We worked with them at our producer updates because we know they have things of value for our producers. So yes, I want to hear all about what they've got. Not all of it may apply to me, but not all of my producers are cookie cutters. They have many different things going on in their farm, and I never know what my approach to them. So I offer it all like a big, beautiful educational buffet.
Great. Okay, thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is RJ Taylor. So RJ is a second generation fish farmer and processor at Spring Hill Market Fish. He farms in Grey County and Manitoulin Island. He's also the managing director for the Ontario Aquaculture Association and vice chair on Elric's board. And before he came back to take over the family farms, he spent a decade in science outreach at Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics, University of Toronto, and Dyson. So welcome, RJ. There we go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yes. So, wow, I must say this has been a really, really fantastic morning. I do want to applaud Jennifer and Jean and Kelly. I think Elric is so uniquely situated to pull such diverse perspectives and people all together in one room. I think as we get more and more siloized with time, that capacity just becomes more beneficial. So I really love to give them a round of applause for everything. Okay, so when Kelly had me locked in a car with her on Manitoulin Island, she asked me if I would speak on behalf of every farmer everywhere today. And so I thought that's a pretty audacious goal. So I tried to put sort of my advice into 5 buckets today. I'm sure to offend someone somewhere, but it told me to the hell with it, so here we go. And I hope my fellow farmers agree with me. So I will say that if you have any issues with the graphics in my presentation, you can talk to ChatGPT, including whatever this thing is up here. But apparently, that's what it thinks we farm today. So, okay, so the first point is just about involving, I think this has sort of been touched on in other presentations, but really involving the farmers from the outset in the project design. I think that that's the easiest way to do that is to get out and visit farms. We're a lot more open and inviting than I think a lot of people think we are. But, you know, just calling up your random farm might not be the best approach. So that's really where they call them sector association or commodity groups. They're really always happy to connect you in with a certain farmer that they know that's eager and willing, or to give you a sort of lay of the land before you find which farmers you want to rope in. And another great way to get out and talk to the farmers is through our industry conferences. So almost every group from Ontario Pork to Ontario Agriculture Association, we pull our farmers together at least once a year for a big sort of conference. It's a little bit different than an academic conference. There's still a lot of socializing and beers and presentations, but the talks are, you know, a lot more broad sweeping and sort of cover everything from technology to government updates and things like that. And so I think if you're ever sort of looking for an opportunity to either get feedback or sort of share, they're great to attend and meet informally, but also I feel like speaking on behalf of the sector groups, we can always make space for you. I have some anti-advice here. Things that I've learned sort of in the 5 or 6 years that I've been working on our Ontario Agriculture Association is that email surveys are a very ineffective way of talking to producers. I think farmers, when it comes to email, the computer isn't something that takes up a lot of our days. We kind of have to sit down and get whatever we need done, and then we move on. So even when I think through the OAA, if I email all the producers and said, if you complete the survey, you'll get a free iPad, and this is going to help the future of the sector, I still think my response rate would be less than 10%. Another thing is webinars. They have a really hard time. We've had a few folks trying to reach out to our farmers that way, and attendance can be very, very challenging for those. And then I just put hosting specific events as a way of encouraging anyone who wants to reach farmers to go where the farmers are at and reach them, because trying to get them to come out to specific events can be a challenge. So I must say, I expected this morning's talks to beat the researchers up a little bit more about involving farmers. I was surprised that wasn't on the agenda, even though I just did it. But what I really wanted to highlight here as a farmer myself is that I think there's just as much responsibility to involve the farmer in the research process as much as there is the researcher into the farm and the way that it works. And I think that's because research is a very big word for those out on farm and even working in supporting farming sectors. And from that, I mean, you know, sometimes we hear about research findings or maybe we should get involved in research projects, but there's not a lot more beyond that explaining it. From that, I mean, when we're like, is this research project a big multi-year alliance grant? Or is it like a 1-year type project? Is it an industry partner that's gone to the university with a very specific problem and they need a producer? Is it an undergrad or graduate capstone project of some sort? Is this more under the training umbrella than necessarily like pure research? And then also like the concept of like, what's a tenured professor versus the grad students in different levels of schooling? A lot of those things we take for granted in a room like this, but out on farm and even in the industry associations, there's not a lot of understanding about that. And if you're involving, if you're sort of bringing in the farmer or going out to the farmer, really helping understand a lot of those processes helps manage some expectations. So we had a little bit of an unfortunate incident between a research group and one of our farms in recent years, because it was oh, we farmers should get involved with researchers, but there wasn't a lot of understanding around like the expectations, because when you find a troublesome research finding or something that, you know, they saw on the farm that really wasn't necessarily meant to be part of the research project. Next thing you know, from a farmer's perspective, that data is published in a peer-reviewed public journal that's citable by the media. And so that concept of like, who owns the data, what happens to it out there, is a little nebulous and confusing. So I really would say, if we're talking about, you know, going through those early steps of the research and then getting into the sort of pilot scale on farm, applying it on farm, or that side of things, really work through that sort of expectation setting and explaining for that. Because I must say that incident was a huge surprise for a lot of our producers and really put a poor taste in our industry's mouth about working with researchers. So I asked our dear friend ChatGPT, that I call Ember now, to give me 15 things that a researcher considers when they're designing a project. So that's what this is. So when someone in the research space, be it a private company or more in academia, you know, you're looking at, you know, what's the rigor of the methodology? How is it relevant? Is it feasible? Where's the money? Looking at the time frame, to fit in the grant timelines, all of those things. But have a slight different opinion of research on farm, because for us, it's mostly the economics. I think there's been, and so before we get too wrapped up in that, you can break up the economics into sustainability and conservation. You know, is there a new welfare practice that's going to help us improve our story and increase sales? It's going to save us money. It's going to help with my labor shortages. And then there's the everything else category there. But I find that disconnect sometimes, because especially when I see some of the interactions between the researchers and some of our producers at, say, our annual conference, that the hearing that the economics is like a sort of 5 or 10% of it, kind of gets some very blank stares from us farmers, because we're like, well, how is that feed ingredient going to improve things next season or next year? It's like, well, you know, the economics in 5 years, algal oil might be applicable, or 10 years, we think cricket meal will be at a point where it can be commercially feasible. But this is less of a soapboxy thing and more of a to improve communication between these two groups, just understanding our different priorities. A fourth thing, this is what Ember thinks a nervous farmer couple looks like, is about de-risking. So I think that a lot of other areas in the business world think that the risk tolerance of farmers being so high, it's like unheard of in other sectors, but it doesn't mean that we necessarily love to take on even more risk just because we're used to it. And so sometimes a barrier to that sort of last step of that commercialization chain is the fact that anything I'm going to try out on my farm and my fellow farmers are going to try out has a risk. It could go wrong. It could also go very right. But I think if we're thinking of sort of a whole systems approach, offering some sort of ways of de-risking that for the farmers to at least give it a try is going to lead to much more massive adoption. And that's, you know, mainly financial incentives if it goes wrong, some sort of a small scale risk sharing program. And then also just encouraging to start small and things, even though a lot of the data and with support going big is going to have good results. Just starting small is a very simple way of de-risking. So my last point before food comes is that if we're talking about getting research into practice on farms, the best person to encourage a farmer to do that is another farmer. I'm really sorry I put the line through the researchers there, but it is kind of, there's sort of a propensity to think that research is much more like longer term and like not necessarily the most applicable, interesting, but like not really applicable to us right now. But if you hear a farmer talking about something that's working, you're bound to listen. And often it only takes 1 or 2 farmers to convince 100 other farmers. So and that's really sort of under the bucket of effective communications, which we've talked about a lot today. And, you know, it's not necessarily just getting your farmer champion, but demonstrating it on farm, making sure your case studies are local, and then using tools like social media. Awesome to see these podcasts out today and YouTube. I think after I've cleaned a bunch of tanks or moved a bunch of fish, I just sit down at the workbench. I necessarily don't open my phone and read my email. I just sometimes go on Instagram or Facebook. And that's a really great place to reach farmers where they're at. So if you're wondering, does ChatGPT think all farmers look like this? No, I told it to make the farmer's toaster. So that's what this guy is right here. Like, look at him right there. So, okay, that's all I have today. And this pun is also ChatGPT. And these are thankful farmers. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your presentation. My question is related to the last slide. So recently we completed a project and asked like different stakeholders about what are the effectiveness of different extension methods. So one of the findings we found like social media or any kind of online media is not that effective. But it becomes more effective when we can use more what we call personalized advice. So like personalized advice could be like more, you know, targeted message. It could be like you do social media, but you have a chance to organize, integrate some kind of workshop, right? So there is many ways you can actually provide advice that is very targeted to specific farmers or farmers group. I don't know how do you think about that, like I say, you know, because the study we did is more multi-stakeholders, farmers is also one of the participants, but is it the same, like farmers think like the personalized advice is important, whether it's provided online or, you know, or face-to-face?
Yeah, so I think that I interpret when you say sort of like personalized advice or like personalized stories to sort of, I think I would use that to mention that farmers aren't really any different than the public in the sense of you can put a lot of graphs, persuasive graphs and data in front of us to persuade us, but it really takes one compelling story that I find relevant to how I do things that's probably going to convince folks to try it. So I hope that answers your question, but I think the best ways I would perhaps encourage for that, you know, if you're trying to share findings, say at an industry conference, for instance, like having a researcher and a farmer tag team it together to share the results. Those types of things help personalize it, but yeah, going simple. Lots of hands. Oh no, that's somebody.
First off, RJ, dang, tell us how you really feel about us researching.
Enough, I was speaking with a few of the people during the break, and one thing we were discussing was incentives on the farmer side. Because we talk a lot as researchers about the incentives of knowledge transfer and trying to apply our research to industry. But is there any incentives that you've seen given for industry to implement these researches, to take the risks and to try and overcome logistical and cost barriers, which can prevent a lot of farmers from taking on research? Have you seen anything like that? Have you applied to any? Have you participated with any?
So I think I can answer that two ways. I think the first one is, I think everybody in this room, we all benefit from being part of such a progressive and passionate field. You know, I talk to folks in other career areas and other work areas, and it's just never seems quite as passionate as it is in agriculture because of what we're doing. So I think there's just like an embedded passion for better animal welfare, sustainability, emissions side of things, and helping the planet, and then just growing food for people. So like when I do see these types of projects successful on reaching out to farms and making them work, it is more of like an emotional play. Like we're compelled to want to do something better and do something different. But have I seen a program that helps farmers de-risk this adoption or encourages it? No, not necessarily. So. And I will say, I really didn't mean to offend any researchers here. I spent a lot of time at the Ontario Aquaculture Research Center, Sam's crying over there. And there are more examples of this amazing research being translated on farms for better asparagus and better chickens and better fish and all of these things. And I'm really thankful for what all of you folks do. I just texted Mike McMorris after our planning call and said, I think I offended someone, and he said, go for it. Don't hold back. So anyway.
Can I just toss in an answer to that too? Because I think that if you want a partnership de-risking and investing on the back end, then everybody needs to be involved at the front end. So I think that if you want commodity organizations and farmers collaborating on the back end and helping with, getting your research into practice, then part of it is speaking to the Poultry Industry Council's point of what is the win from the outset for those people should be incorporated in the design at the very beginning, so that there's incentive all the way through to partner in the delivery of the project.
And I think there was one more question over there. Popular.
I have something kind of quick to add to that. And RJ, you mentioned kind of a horror story in working with researchers and not understanding like who owns the data or the knowledge gained from it. Do you think that we would benefit from kind of having a protocol or standard code of practice in researchers, industry, or farmers, like going into it that's standard across different sectors of the livestock industry, so that we know that before the research is complete and studies are published?
I would absolutely support that, because I think as much as I kick the researchers, I also kick the farmers for not understanding this process either. That was really meant to be a farmer dig. But I think that it falls, if every interaction with a farmer or industry, like the responsibility of sharing all that information, like falls on you as the researchers, like I think there is a way to probably streamline that. Like when you go to the dentist and they make you sign this sheet that's like, oh, we might cut your tongue and we might do this and we might do that. You don't read it, but then we cut your tongue and you complain and they say, we gave you a sheet. I think there's a better way to do it than that, but there could be some sort of an info session or communication, because it would be helpful in retrospect.
Okay, I wish you would have told me years ago that nobody listens to us. I wasted my vote. Trying to talk to them. Oh my, anyway, more seriously, give the researchers a few tips on how we best can communicate with farmers, because we obviously have to get through this whole sort of process here. So what are your tips for communicating with farmers more effectively?
Great. I think the first one was about reaching the farmers where they're at. And I know that you have spent a lot of time on farms and involved in the industry associations, and that is why every fish farmer listens to you, Rich. But I think sort of reaching them in that capacity. But like I think back to that sort of earlier point, when farmers are brought in right near the end, they sort of have missed the mark on what the benefits are. And I feel like I've seen more instances of like being told why this is good, instead of sometimes asking the questions about how things work on the farm. But I'm sure many of you have worked with farmers, but when you really start asking questions about the processes and why they do things, we don't stop talking because we're really excited about things. So I think the first step would probably be listening to them and asking questions. And yeah, I think Cheryl had lots more ideas when I set the mic down.
Last one.
Well, and I wanted to add to that, thanks so much, RJ. As a farmer, you did a great job, right? Just how KTT is like marbled through everything, can we have an economic analysis marbled through everything? Because I'd almost want that to be the first slides that you've thought about from our perspective, the economics. And then be willing to talk after that. Not a question.
Good way to end it.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you so much, RJ.
Okay, we're good to go. Perfect. Excellent. Well, welcome back after lunch, everybody. I'm Mike McMorris. I was with Elora for 5 really neat years in my career, and now I'm happily retired. For those who wonder, retirement can be great. Just make sure you have some hobbies before you hang out your workload and wonder what to do. So that's why I have the pleasure of hosting a panel. This panel was very carefully selected. You will see they're all dairy oriented. Be really clear that that wasn't the intention, that we're just talking dairy. One of the things that Elora really focuses on is that there's a lot of similarities and opportunities for collaboration across sectors. So although this will sound very dairy-ish, think about from your perspective how you can take some things from dairy and put it into your subsector, or look for some cross-sector opportunities. Just before we get going to say who's on the panel, I'm intrigued to know who's in the room. So the 3 categories, you have to put your hand up for one of them. So it's, are you a researcher at government or industry? Industry meaning producer, industry organization, support, et cetera. Walk around so you get a sense of who's in the room. So let's start with industry. Okay. And research. Great. And government, probably on alphabet research. Not too far off the third. So that's really, really good. Again, before we get going, just my background. My first job was doing extension in the ministry, so I lived some of what people look back now at ancient history. I lived through some of that transition, and certainly some people have rose-colored glasses looking back at it. But one of the things, come back to, I lost my train of thought. I'm going to introduce now. So, and this first question would have to introduce themselves a little bit more. But Deb Whale, who probably most in the room know is a dairy farmer not too far from here, but she's been incredibly active in a whole number of organizations over her time. Steve Rowe, who has his own private consulting company called Acer Consulting, very actively engaged in actually doing a grip. Robert Matson, who's with Dairy Farmers of Ontario, he's with Dairy Farmers for 1.5 years. and Mike Steele, who's a researcher at the University of Guelph. So we've got kind of the continuum of people involved in GRIP. One of the points about GRIP, somebody pointed out to me, is that sometimes it's not getting research into practice, but it's just a change in management. It's a nuance, but it's an important nuance. Sometimes we tend to think of researcher to farmer. Sometimes it's not a researcher, it's an inventor. That can be different. And there are a whole lot of people in between the farmer and the person who invented or did the research. So one of the, I want to go back to what I was talking about first. One of the things I found when I started with Elora 5 years ago is that GRIP or KTT was a topic of discussion I would find myself having with people in government, industry, and academia. But to be really candid, there's a lot of finger pointing. People say, oh, they've got to do something differently. And I'm really, really happy that this being the third GRIP roundtable, I think we're really moving past that finger pointing to, okay, well, if we can do better, how do we do it together? So I think just having that mixture of people in the room really sets us up for some success. So on to the panel. Really quick introduction, like a minute, of who you are and what role you play in this GRIP team that we talk about.
It's been extensive, I can't remember most of it. But I am still an active dairy farmer just up here in North Wellington. And I belong to a lot of organizations, many of them in the R&D field and some of them doing extension work as well. So things like ARIO, the Poultry Industry Council, the University of Alberta Research and Extension Group, Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization, Saskatchewan. And I've also had the opportunity to work with CMEX in China and a couple of other countries. And all of it's been really interesting and valuable for me. Right now, I'm the president of Where You Are at the GrandWay Agricultural Society. And we do a lot of work with great organizations like ELRIC and many others to do the extension work and put our investment dollars into young, innovative companies, amongst many other things.
Steve Roach. I guess I wear a few hats. I am a researcher in the sense that did my graduate school at the OBC and was focused on how to support veterinarians and advisors motivate on-farm change. So naturally, you start asking questions about how we share information, how we influence people, social science, economics, all that stuff comes together. And what we do in terms of communication and behavior as people, as farmers, and as advisors that are aiming to influence them. That led me to more research that continues to this day, focused on how we do KTT extension, whatever we want to call it, our methods, our strategies, our impact associated with those things. On the other side of the coin, we support other programs, organizations in developing resources or full programs on how to do this, how to reach farmers. And I spend a lot of time these days training, particularly farm advisors, veterinarians, hoof trimmers, nutritionists, on how to talk about a specific topic, the code of practice, for example, or some other thyroid issue. Again, as a consultant, I work with a variety of different organizations, so it's a little bit more tied to what are their priorities and wants and interests, and then working from there. So it's sort of both sides of the coin, and I shouldn't forget working directly with farmers as well. It's a big part of what I do.
Wow, I'm gonna have to follow that. Okay, my name is Robert Matson. I work for the Dairy Farmers of Ontario. My day-to-day job is that I manage the research portfolio with DFO. But I also have the pleasure of being in the production department. And so that's everything from looking after some aspects of data analysis, ProAction, and then also connection to DFC. And so my job is very varied. I also have a little bit of a role in the environmental farm plan modernization. And so, yeah, I do wear a lot of hats, and I'm happy to be here today. Happy to have such a great room.
I'm Steve. I'm a professor in the Department of Animal Biosciences. I actually grew up on a dairy and beef farm about an hour away from here. So I am a professor that loves basic research. I can also speak farming, and that's a huge advantage, I think, for my research program. So I do a lot of teaching. I'm also the grad coordinator for our department. So I like getting our department more integrated with industry. So we have several events to do so. We have a mixer December 10th on campus to do so. But predominantly, I'm doing a lot of research, and the bulk of my research is in the transition cow, early life nutrition of dairy calves, and more recently, dairy beef animals. So thank you. And I'm also extremely passionate about knowledge transfer.
Great, thanks. So now you know where these folks come from and what they're involved in GRIP. Let's start really high level. So define GRIP as, and we'll narrow it down a little bit to research into practice. Thinking of all the players that are involved, you'll probably speak mostly from a dairy perspective, but if you can, think more broadly to livestock. So the GRIP system or ecosystem or team in Ontario, on a scale of 10, it couldn't be better, and 0, give up. What do you give it?
So I'll be a little bit both pessimistic and optimistic here. I'll give us a 7. Because I think we're starting to make some of those connections with industry groups, and we're starting to refine about what our producers would actually like to see. But those remaining 3 points are really our connection back to our producers and also connecting with them and tying in all the information, both from the research side and also the on-farm application side. And so I'll give us a 7.
What did you give it? Are you asking an epidemiologist to give you a number? Yeah, maybe I agree. Maybe I might go 6, something like that. I think one thing, I guess, when we think about this kind of room, we need to appreciate is we don't have the ability to control and influence KTT or whatever, again, we want to call it, everywhere at the same time. There are pockets that in Ontario, for example, that are, just burgeoning with all sorts of information, people, activities, and so on. Guelph is a great example of that. But go to central or northern Ontario, where it's a very different situation, right? Not that we aren't trying to focus on some of those areas, but the point being is that the dynamics that make up how people access information, not just their preferences, but who they work with, who they trust, how they interact with all that stuff changes. So we have work to do in understanding equity associated with access to information or resources beyond just our strategies for doing it. That needs to influence our strategies and our investment and so on. So I think we're doing pretty well. We in Ontario are pretty darn lucky with a lot of things we have here in addition to the resources. We heard a lot about that today. We can do more. My big point, I'll probably bring it up again, is capacity. We need the next generation and generations to be trained and supported on how to do this, regardless of whether it is going to become faculty, industry, a farmer. We need to talk more about how to do this and the mindset associated with that beyond just saying, we got to do more KTT.
I'm also going to go with 7 because I think we have a huge number of resources, but it's not just from the universities, it's from the machinery companies, it's from the feed companies. It's from the veterinarians, and it's also from the US and from Western Europe. And there's absolutely no excuse for any dairy producer not to have access to a lot of information. We're far from perfect, but we will get better all the time. There are a few people, I think, that I have come across in this whole arena who have really made a big difference. And I would say not only because of what they know, but of the personalities that they have and their ability to work with farmers. I'd really like to shout out to Dr. Ken Leslie, who is now retired, but he did just such a fantastic job with the dairy research and extension program at OBC. I'd also like to mention Tina Budowski, who has been instrumental in dealing with issues of animal welfare. And one organization that I look to a lot for information, which I think is excellent, is the Ontario Veal Association. They do such a good job of giving us information about calf care. So I think we're doing well. We can always do better.
I'm going to say 6.5. There's a lot of opportunity to improve, which is really exciting. I guess my biggest frustration is when I visit dairy farmers, a lot of them are not aware of what we're doing at the University of Guelph. They're more aware of Cornell University or Michigan State University, California Davis. And largely that's because of the huge number of extension people that they have on staff within those universities. But that's one thing that gets to me, and I think we can do a better job, maybe streamlining a lot of it seems like we are in different pockets everywhere. I think maybe if we streamline, it could be more efficient. I think that there is room for improvement.
Great, thanks. We heard a lot of different perspectives this morning. What one thing or two, if you want to stretch it, caught your attention? Maybe grab your pen and make a note.
Yeah, so I actually really liked Angie's presentation where she mentioned the word trust. And so we're partners in the Living Lab program, and we are also working with Steve on the Welly project, and we have many projects with Mike. And I think the idea there is that we have a trust with the people that we're engaging with, and we trust the farmers in order to engage with the researchers as well when they're going on farm, and to treat everyone with respect. And so I would just use the word trust in order to, like, that word really resonated with me today.
Yeah, I think RJ's talk really opened up my mind. I try my best to get in front of producers as much as I can, but I think that the way that we deliver these messages need to be refined. And that presentation really stuck with me.
Mark's presentation in hockey always resonates for me, but beyond that, Adam had a slide or two that I mean, one, accountability is a huge one for me. I really appreciate that, and what ties to that, trust was a big one. You stole, but I had for is measurement evaluation. So we're doing a lot of stuff. How do we know if it's sticking? Right, we're still taking a lot of that. Not just necessarily a linear approach, but that if I share my research results with farmer A, B, and C, they will rationally implement it and so on, or this constant sharing of BMPs is the way to go. And what we know is change is messy. People have different needs, wants, priorities, and means, and so on. And so the social elements of what ultimately influence people's decision are often 99 times out of 10 not just based on what they know or don't know. And so despite that most of us know that inherently, the knowledge deficit sort of approach that we take to communication or education still reigns supreme. So more influence of attitude, more influence of mindset. So measurement of, are we actually doing that? Is for me a big piece, which comes back to accountability as well.
So my takeaway came from the larger group. And the longer the morning went on, the harder my heart pounded. Because I thought, well, there is some really good stuff going on in this room. Think about this. There is a massive infrastructure in place to do research and to disseminate research. There is another big bureaucracy that makes rules and implements rules and legislation. There is a constant pressure to bow to the demands of the consumer. And there are really complicated issues that we did not speak about today for the most part. Things like data ownership, things like the carbon credit market, and certainly cybersecurity on the farm. And where is all of this pointing? In one direction, and that is the farmer. And we're supposed to deal with all of this as 1% of the population. And God help the population if that 1% dies off. So we need to figure this out. You cannot put so much pressure on a tiny portion of the population because it's not doable. And if we have time later, I have maybe one solution to that problem. But as we pile more and more requirements onto ourselves and more need to do the extension work, how is that farmer going to cope with it?
So rather than lose that train of thought, why don't you take a moment?
Okay, so in June, we had that really good LRIP meeting with Mary Wells here, who, as you know, is the Dean of Engineering, University of Waterloo, quite an impressive woman. And I think she laid down a gauntlet for the U of G and other places in saying that, you know, we at the U of W and the engineering world have really not thought much about agriculture, but now we're changing our tune. We're looking at it very closely. There's a lot of work going on in ag tech and green tech that interests those people. In addition to that, she did emphasize how much emphasis they put on teaching their students about business opportunities, and starting new businesses. And I got thinking about that, and I thought, all right, if I were going to build a house, I wouldn't sit down with a piece of paper and design it myself. I'd probably hire an architect who knew what she was doing. So what if we had some businesses that came out of the U of W, U of G, and I don't care where, who said, you know, we can be consultants to my farm, your farm, everybody's farm. We come to my farm and we say, what technologies are you currently using? What holes do we assess that there are here? What top 3 priorities would we recommend that you institute on this farm at this cost, for this reason, for this ROI? And in addition to that, once all of that was mapped out and I went along with it and agreed, then I also need somebody to come back, show me how to use the stuff. I want somebody to repair it. I want somebody to modernize it when it starts to wear out. I want somebody to worry about cybersecurity on my farm with all of this technology. So maybe I need a farm use planner or an architect or whatever we would call that company, but I need help.
Any thoughts from the other three panelists on that point? I think there's a lot of, it's interesting, and what it makes me think of is this is the approach that the layer sector and following that, the dairy sector, the UK and Wales have taken to some degree. They have done a lot of, Royal We have done a lot of research on what influences on farm uptake of different practices. And a big part is farmers influencing farmers with facilitation and peer networks and so on. And so there's that project called Innovation that was part of the Horizon 2020 funds, if anyone's familiar with European sort of funding. So some time ago, that essentially trained up a group of informed but largely generalist facilitators who got groups of layer producers together talking about priority issues, and then we're resourced enough to follow some of those opportunities through. So we have trial farms or test farms, we have peer networking, all of that stuff, local context, all of that working. Since then, the UK dairy industry, so a part of AHDB, have initiated something similar to tackle antimicrobial stewardship. So they have a large number of facilitators that are going around. They are in most cases not the vet. The vet is brought into a conversation when relevant, other advisors as well, and they get groups of producers together to talk about what's working. They benchmark locally, they talk locally, they bring in other speakers and so on. And it's proving to be very effective. It's resource intensive. It is different types of outcomes, and it also brings me back to my comment about measurement and evaluation. Is a realistic expectation of what kind of influence we can have if we take that approach? That's messy, and there's no guarantees, but it's an interesting approach that now has some traction. So it's not exactly what you're talking about, Deb, but my thoughts.
Yeah, I don't have any specific thoughts about that in particular, but I think it's a really good point and we should hold on to it. But I'd also say there's many different aspects of dairy that we need to look at. And so it's not just on farm, it's also, we need the engineering solutions at the actual, like the plant level in order to deal with certain other issues that we're facing. And so I would just say that the time is right for agriculture right now in order for us to rethink and rechange what we've been doing over the last 50 years and hold on to what's actually important and what was working and to figure out new ways of finding solutions for things.
Back to Steve and Deborah's point, I learned 5 years ago putting on a conference for producers that really the most highly ranked part is, of course, the producer panel. And from that point on, even with technical days with or conferences with industry or industry representatives, you always have to incorporate a farmer, or else the message will be convoluted and you need that piece. So it's something I learned 5 years ago. I've been implementing it, and consistently when you look at the scores, it's always the highest. So it's great to think that I have an awesome presentation, but I have to be realistic, and if I really care about knowledge transfer, you have to include that component now.
Certainly, Steve raised the issue of capacity. Mark talked about relationships and trust being built organically. All of this takes time. I don't think there's a person in this room, certainly not a farmer I know, that has a lot of extra time they're looking to invest. This is one of the questions, so if I look off guard, that's why. Where do we find that capacity? It's simplistic to think, well, government should do it, or industry should do it. It seems to have been picked up piecemeal by vets and the role producer organizations play today in Europe is very, very different than 20 years ago, let alone 30. But if we're acknowledging there's a capacity issue, do you have thoughts on that? So how do we break through that? How do we get some people who have time to do some of this stuff? So I guess I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, one is, if you look around or think about where we are all coming from here, there's a major role for the university to play here in curriculum in terms of supporting an understanding of, perhaps appreciation for at minimum, but maybe even more work on how to do KTT, that kind of thing, going beyond days like this, but really getting formal training on how to do some of these things. That may spark and is the longer term play to getting
a bigger room like this over time, more people invested and interested in having these conversations, so are finding creative ways to share information, which is a little bit of where I came from, I suppose, as a student, thinking I was going to be doing my PhD and become a professor, like Mike, and really aspiring to do that. And here I am sort of sitting in the wings a little bit between all of the government, academia, and industry, trying to support and find ways to share science and enable or, again, whatever adjective you want to use for me, depending on the project. But the more immediate solution is not wrong in finding, we don't need to create necessarily new people, new roles. We need to find ways to tap into the existing trusted relationships and networks that our farmers have already. And so we do that effectively in some cases. We do that well with veterinarians. Again, no one population is all the same. There are pockets of veterinarians in areas where we don't have a lot of veterinarians, for example. We don't do as good of a job of working with hoof trimmers, some nutritionists, and so on. But the point being, we have industry field reps, we have lactinated dairy, we have a variety of other agencies, organizations that exist and have existed for some time to build strong relationships. We need to find ways to leverage that. The problem becomes when we have things that are just a public good, something that isn't the priority of these independent organizations or actors. What do we do then? That's where there can be a government role. So we need to think about this as an onion we need to peel back, I think, in terms of thinking about capacity. And we're not going to create a new intermediary that's going to be the perfect solution for all these things. It may be topic specific, it may be organization specific. It depends on the issue. It depends on the priorities.
I think one thing we don't need is one more agricultural organization. There are way too many. And at one point, Mike was going to ask us what we thought was a really good outreach program that we admired. And I was going to talk about two of them. One is this CAPI, Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute. I think they do just a top-notch job of cleverly analyzing the issues that are before us. And I think spotting trends and figuring out how Canada and Canadian agriculture is or is not responding to these trends. And one very recent paper they did was called Forces Impacting Animal Agriculture in Canada. And they looked at the trends of the global demand for meat and the fact that the Canadian capacity to fill that demand is completely out of sync with the demand. It discussed our obvious advantages that we have here. I won't go through them, but we probably most of us in this room know. We talked about our low greenhouse gas emissions in the sector. We talked about our production challenges, labor being one of them, of course, climate change, et cetera, and all of the things the livestock industries need to analyze in order to be competitive in the international and national market. So I would look to an organization like CAPI to help us analyze the trends and where we need to be moving now and in the future. And another organization that I was actually one of the founding people in was the Ontario Livestock and Poultry Council, and they're specifically geared to looking at transmissible livestock and poultry diseases. And I think that's a fair thing if you can concentrate your expertise. But what they've done is pull together a really good forum that meets regularly, and it represents all of the animal health strategists in the province. And they have designed multi-species strategies to prevent and control disease transmission, which is extremely important in the world as we know it today. So I'm thinking that there are good organizations out there, and perhaps what we need to do is figure out who they are, bring their capacities to the table and use them more than we currently are, but please no more organizations.
Yeah, as my role as a professor, we're not evaluated on knowledge transfer. There's no incentive for us to do it other than the incentive of your own research program and making sure you have large impact. So with respect to developing a lot of the knowledge transfer, which I think is really critical, it is transfer because all my ideas come from those meetings. But it is partnering with the commodity groups in the industry now. That's really what's dominating everything. You always think, would we benefit from a staff member within the university to do a lot of this extension like a lot of the universities in the US? maybe, I think it could work. I know that's going back in history and time when we used to have that. But I do think perhaps a more organized approach rather than random meetings here and there could actually benefit. But that's just my 2 cents on it.
Follow-up question, Mike, you take the lead on this as a researcher. I think at the farm level, probably farmers are looking at a body of evidence, or they would call it that, but like, what's all of it telling me is a good option? Whereas a specific research project might have a KTT element, but that's maybe not the same as GRIP that's getting to the farm with, here's what everything is saying to do. How do you see those two and coming together?
Yeah, it's always, you don't want to just go to the end user with one study. It's always a scary thing to do. You don't want to have only one study dictate what will happen with producers. So I like telling the story of the history of the research, and that's how I translate the body of the research. I just tell a quick story over 2 to 5 minutes. If it's longer, it will be, and you can actually reach every piece of the body of research through that quick story. So, you know, I do a lot of probiotic work and I go through, we did this first study, it didn't do anything. This is why. This is what led us to the next study. There in this scenario, it works. So you can kind of tell the story and get the knowledge transferred to the end user of how this technology can be effective. So, but you have to make sure that you're very, very concise. And I really was influenced when I worked in industry before. So I worked in industry a lot before academia. And I read this book, industry representative gave it to me in the company called Make It Stick. And that book really changed how I do presentations, but in basic, just the take-home messages. As scientists, we want to be perfect when we present science. But if we want to translate that to the end user, we need to bend the message a little bit to maximize the knowledge transfer. And that's really hard for a scientist to do. But if we really care about knowledge transfer, we have to make use of some of these other more creative ways of getting the message across.
Yeah, I'll go back to the agronomy side of my roots here and say that our farmers are the best communicators as to what the best management practices are, and what works on a farm will often become more translated to other farmers. And so I'll just give 2 examples. Like robot milking, for example, or automated milking system. It's not for everyone, but those who are planning on going into that will usually tour a bunch of farms and listen and discuss with that farmer in order to figure out what went well, what didn't go well. The same thing, we've seen cover cropping taking off in terms of the dairy industry. It's taking off because it's working for those farmers who are doing it and they're sharing their success. And so the research side is having to catch up over time to what the farmers are already doing because they've seen it benefit in their soil and they've seen it benefit in terms of even the economic opportunity there. And so the ROI works. And so it's about the farmer sharing some of those stories and the researcher trying to figure out how they can best support that kind of knowledge exchange. We'll call it that, Mike, not great, knowledge exchange.
I guess going back to Mike's point a little bit, I think good KTT can't or shouldn't just focus on the results of one study, even if it is the end product. You know, we've got a KTT element that's tied to this individual project. What are the results of that? Like, we need to put that in the context of the bigger story. What does that help us understand? Where were we before? What do we know now? What are our questions moving forward? I think we owe it to our end users to provide them with that perspective and that context. Otherwise, we do run the risk of saying, well, this one trial shows the following, and therefore we don't know much. Let's be honest. And so that's for me a big part of the story. The other thing that I would say is to your point is I'm trying to do much more now in sharing stories of real people and embedding the evidence in those stories. Here's what worked for Mike on his farm, in his words, in his eyes, be it podcast, video, written case study. In some cases, I make up a fictitious producer, but again, working with a lot of producers, I use their language, I use their perspective, I use things that tend to resonate with that audience. They're trying to creatively write and embrace and integrate some of those evidence-based messages. Here's that story you heard. Here's why some of those things might work. The science is showing us the following things. So trying to make it more sticky brains are wired to take in stories. So it's captivate, or it's trying to make it captivating to engage them and then share information in a more digestible way.
Well, I'm going to say something that I don't think is controversial in my head, but we shall see. I strongly advocating narrowing the grip focus to that small percentage of agribusinesses and farmers who are actually willing to learn, to innovate, to adapt, to adopt, to figure things out. Somebody earlier in the room said 25%. I think I would say 10%. It doesn't matter. Those are your key people. Those are the key people you need to sell the ideas to and to work with to adopt them. Because ultimately they will become your best, what I'm calling grippers. They will be the best people to go out and sell to the next 40%. Beyond that, the last 50%, leave them alone. Concentrate on the doers and the movers and shakers, and you will make a big difference.
We've heard the term stories several times there. Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have become one of the story writers in the Canadian dairy industry. And that's great. I think it's been highly successful. Not every industry has made that move. So think beyond dairy for a moment to a dairy group, but how do we tell more stories in livestock? Who bundles stuff together and packages and puts it into a story in the right language?
I'll do my best, Mike, in order to avoid the dairy example, but I'll just tie back to something that Steve has done really effectively in the dairy side and then tie to how other industries can do it. And so Steve, along with a Malpass project funded by Dairy Farmers of Ontario as well, I'll shamelessly plug, looked at those farms that were in a deep red score for proaction in terms of one of their animal health measures, and interviewed those farmers about how they then improved into better proaction scores. And so that story itself is sharing not only a success story from the farm, but also a positive thing that we can communicate back to the consumer about how we're changing as an industry. And every single commodity in this room will have some sort of positive story that they were able to tell in terms of how they were able to go about that journey. And so if we can start kind of tying those in and saying how, we took something that was potentially controversial and moved it in a direction that was a better outcome, either welfare or economics, we can start telling those stories and have a bigger impact and have a wider audience. So that would be my take. I'll turn it over to Steve because I just talked a lot about him for a second, so I'll let him respond.
I guess my initial reaction to your conversation or your question, Mike, is that the stories are being told and shared in all different commodities. And, Deb mentioned we don't need another agricultural organization. Dairy may, in supply management, I'll give your often comment, supply management and non-supply management are two very different things in terms of resourcing, structure, function, all of the above, particularly in Ontario. And that being said, we have strong organizations across the board in livestock and poultry in Ontario and Canada. Their job is to know about the stories. Their job is sharing those stories. I mean, if we strip all this away, the grassroots of farming is sharing information through stories. And so what we ought to or could perhaps do a better job is thinking creatively about how we capture and then broadly share those stories. Adam talked a lot about storytelling and sharing some of that information. So some of this is basic, not basic, it's going back to communications thinking. And our farm trade media, plenty of places exist to do this already. So it's not about reinventing the wheel. In some cases, it's about engaging or thinking, who is telling those stories? I'm working with every national commodity association in Canada right now. That's not meant to be a shameless plug. I've just been amazed at how much similarity there is in terms of there are vibrant, exciting stories, amazing champions across the country. It's about engaging with some of those. And then to Robert's point, I'm also interested in finding those folks that are trying, making a real effort and talking about what's working and what didn't work. So we can share those lessons with producers as well, and frankly, their advisors. So for me, those stories exist. It's just about seeking them out and helping to facilitate their dissemination.
Just a time check. We have time for 2 questions. Okay. Picture, we're playing team sport here. You are now the team owner and coach.
what changes would you make being in those positions?
As the coach of a team.
Owner and coach.
Good. Okay, so I'll just give you an example. Last night, the board of directors of Grand River Agricultural Society had a big strategic planning session. There are a couple of our board members in here today, and we came up with all sorts of really good ideas. Some will be short-term, immediate wins, and others will be very expensive and longer-term things, but we will do them. And the trick is to map it out so that we know what we're doing when, who is responsible for what, and hold their feet to the fire. And as the president, I do intend to do that. If I owned it, I'd do it even more because there's money in it. But I think that that is the trick. We know you need your goals, you need your reasons for those goals, you set your priorities, and you damn well do it. Because as far as I'm concerned, if you're a good member of the team, then you are a person who does what you say you're going to do on time.
Just very short, it would be really nice to have like set plays, like a very detailed organization rather than improvising a lot. That's what I find that I'm doing is I'm just improvising and I'm not aware, maybe it's my own fault of what else is going on and where some of the synergies could be. So I try my best to find the synergies, but it'd be nice that we had some form of play that we're always going to, that's effective under all the different scenarios. And yeah, the accountability too. It's really difficult in a lot of these groups where everyone's basically just volunteering, at least in our field, as professors, like to really hold people accountable, because there's a lot of work that goes into it. And if you're not committed, things can fall between the cracks pretty easily.
I often use the word momentum to describe the train rolling down the tracks. Like if you were to design the Canadian dairy industry today, you couldn't imagine the complexity that's been created over the years. And so that goes, we're a delegated authority of MAPA, and so we have a connection to government, and we're also a marketing board that represents our dairy producers. And so you've got a wide range of things there. And for us to work with groups like Lactanet, and we're representatives on DFC, for example, and we work with people like Steve, and we work with researchers from the University of Guelph, we all have to keep the momentum up in order to keep moving in a direction that's going to move the industry forward. Otherwise, it doesn't matter what each of us do individually.
I make the team bigger. I add in the end users that I think I want to target and people that they work with, and then I would ask each of them to spend the day with the other person and listen. And I'd like them to talk about why the issue that we're focused on is of relevance and importance to them. I'd like the dairy farmer to sit next to the processor, to sit next to the retailer. I realize that doesn't happen, and I think that's part of the problem in some cases. I think we're better off involving some of the end users. We hear farmers that say they don't understand why a net zero commitment has been made, for example. We're not doing a good job explaining that top down or bottom up in some cases, and there's no reason for that. And now we're backpedaling, saying, how do we communicate this to the broader masses? We have groups that say, how do we access hoof trimmers or veterinarians in the north? We can't pin them down. And then you go to those places and they say, no one's reaching for us. We have disconnect in many cases, and I think we'd be better off trying to be more inclusive up front with some of those things and asking questions and listening.
Leap off point from set plays, that's really intriguing. So we have processes in place for research priorities and ensure they could be improved, more connections, but there are processes. You just made me realize that blind links the obvious. We don't really have a lot of processes around GRIP. Without creating the organization, how would we, or do you have thoughts on, what would that look like? Who would come together? Like there's so many involved in the GRIP landscape. How would you do that? How would you help some set place?
Yeah, so we already have the organizations that exist. It's just about connecting our researchers and our producers with those organizations. So OLPC was mentioned, Ontario Livestock and Poultry Council. LRIC exists, for example. And so it's about creating those kind of connections with those organizations that are already doing a lot of the work that we'd like to see, and making those connections with the producer. We had Dairy Guelph Day here last Tuesday. it was Tuesday. Right, okay. And so it's those connections, bringing producers, researchers, and increasing the number of producers in that room, because as the research was being presented, it's about creating the opportunity. We have a lot of producer-run conferences in Ontario. We're very lucky for that. It's about promoting, if you're not presenting as a researcher, go to the conference, learn something, talk to producers. You learn more in the break time than you do any other time of the conference, most of the time, at least myself. I learn a lot by talking to people and just communicating. So that would be a set play for me.
Yeah, I think that I've learned a lot from your group, just watching what your group does. I've stolen a lot of plays from your group with respect to knowledge transfer. So I think just watching what everyone else is doing and communicating with all the different groups, like now that I'm doing more dairy beef work, it's been really neat to see how the Canadian Cattle Research BCRC is doing all this knowledge transfer. Like with every grant, I have to write a short article that they're just going to cut and paste. Like it's very well structured. And same with their training of students to make sure that they know how to transfer knowledge. There's lots of opportunities. So I think just observing the other groups and what's working the best and talking to each other. And, I think that's how everyone's developing plays in sports or in industry.
I think we have to understand that we cannot play in every sandbox, nor do we want to. There aren't enough of us and there's not enough time, there's not enough money. And I figure we could do a better job of looking around at other countries, doing the kinds of research that we're interested in and taking what they've figured out. So I think that we have to look at where they excel in research and also in innovation and bring those things back here and start to incorporate them. And maybe at the same time, look around at what we think we might be really good at. And perhaps, I'm just saying perhaps, that is applying what we've learned elsewhere to the problems in our own industries. And I think that another thing that I would like to mention before this is over is we have a limited number of research facilities in livestock across this country. They're good. They're doing a good job. How do we ensure that they continue to improve on their ability to collaborate and cooperate so that, again, we're not reinventing the wheel and paying to do that?
Yeah, you mentioned research facilities. It ties into the second last question. We're about, as a crow flies, probably 4 kilometers from some world-leading livestock research facilities. Results and meeting commitments has been mentioned. People will be looking for results from those research facilities over the coming decades. They're a big investment. A really good example of industry, government, and university all coming together. Like it's a really neat situation. Part of getting results from those research facilities is effective GRIP. And GRIP can benefit from those research facilities. So when you think of GRIP and those research facilities complementing one another, what are your thoughts on how do we make sure we maximize each for the other?
I thought of a few ideas, and none of them are innovative, believe me, because I think we've heard some good ideas throughout the day. But somebody said earlier, what is working and what is working on farms? That's an important thing to figure out in those facilities that you mentioned at Elora. I think we have to, again, I will say, extend the information to the relatively few producers who will actually make the trip to visit the facility so that we can use the internet for virtual tours and virtual education sessions. Again, I think in any place, particularly at in the barns in Elora, there's a really big need for very effective communicators to do the show and tell in the barns to either a virtual audience or an in-place audience, because I think those people, the people who like people and who are really good at talking and selling ideas, maybe take them for granted, but we need more of them. And so I would hope that we would see 1 or 2 or even 4 in Elora.
I guess I'll just keep my comment brief. We're getting my eyes. I think for me, perhaps the big thing to just keep in mind is, I mean, these facilities can serve multi-purposes, right? Communication, education, that kind of thing of students, the public, and of producers as well, or their advisors. They use them quite a bit to facilitate advisor training, that kind of thing. For me, we need to think of them as I think there's the bottom-up and top-down approach to research. We can use this as a test site to try things that are maybe impractical, or maybe to, you have a lot of kinks to work out, aren't going to be cost effective to work on a commercial dairy farm or farm for full stop. So we're gonna try them here conceptually, and we're gonna see what works and then look to apply it. But we can also take the other approach as well. We can bring more industry ideas to the table and solicit feedback from them. What would you like to see us try? There are a number of studies looking at the not my backyard concept out of Australia. Whatever we prove in a test facility, even if it's down the road, we go find the next dairy farm and they say, we saw in Elora Dairy the following results. Not in my backyard, you didn't. And so there's something real to human behavior around, you didn't show it in my specific circumstance, and therefore it may or may not be something I buy into depending on my other mindset factors. So how do we leverage these sites to do very interesting, perhaps experimental research, but how do we trial and test things that can also be ground truth on commercial farms?
And I'll just touch point on this and say that those facilities are actually a combination. There's many different organizations that are involved in them. So ARIO owns the land and the buildings, and University of Guelph manages them, and DFO provides some quota for the dairy facility. And that's not the only research place that we have. In fact, we say that we have 10,000 research farms across Canada because we have 10,000 dairy farms that research is actively been going on. We have a very good genetics infrastructure. Lactanet does a very good job of managing that infrastructure along with the semen companies. And so there's research being done in a lot of different ways. We have observational controlled, and so maintaining that and putting the right things at the right places is what we need to do.
I'd like to just say that our research facilities just down the road are the best research facilities in the world. That's very clear to me, especially our dairy and beef. Haven't spent the time in the swine. It's very exciting that the poultry is coming. But I can say that we're in the driver's seat worldwide to produce some of the best research. That's very clear to me with the hardware that we have just down the road. Where I could see is a lot more opportunity is bringing more producers or industry members. It is happening, but it's kind of, discombobulated in a way, like I'm bringing some producers on the next Wednesday and the following Wednesday through our dairy unit. So I think it could be a little bit more efficient the way that we translated, and we do have seminar rooms, and we should be filling them on at least a monthly or weekly basis. There's really no reason why we can't pull more producers and end users right into our own seminar rooms. I think that's about it. I just wanted everyone to know that our facilities are outstanding. We are very, very lucky. I think we're going to attract a lot of great research in the coming years because of it.
On behalf of everybody here, thank you very much. I know you're very busy people, and taking half a day or a full day, however long you're here, is a big deal. So we really appreciate you, but that's show our appreciation.
So I want to thank everybody. If you want to walk out, and Mike, you can come back here too. There's some thank you gifts over there. So pick yourself up a thank you gift on your way back. And thank you so much for your contribution. To everybody. Anybody learned anything today? Hands? Anybody going to go away with some new ideas? On everybody's table, there's a sheet that looks like this. And when I walked around at lunch, there wasn't much written on them. I'd like at your tables to give you 5 minutes and make sure there's some writing on your papers that you'll leave behind that will collate, and I think we'll build something pretty neat out of what we've done today. If you already filled out your paper, there's another one coming around from Kristen that will help us to know what worked today, what you learned the most about, and we're looking at doing again another roundtable sometime, probably late next summer. So any input you have would be very valuable to us. My other plug is that we do a newsletter and send out announcements regarding funding. And I put together something called Research Scouts, which looks at just some research that short clips that have been published throughout, a lot of it in North America, but some throughout internationally as well, that send out. So if you want to sign up for those, go check out our website. There is a spot there to sign up. And if you can't find it, just send me an email and I'll add you to the list. Well, as I see the discussion going on, I just want to reiterate, thank you very much for coming today and leaving us the information behind that you will. We've got the room for longer if people want to continue on with some discussions, but thank you and a hand for all those that participated. I pat on the back for everybody that came and thanks for anybody that's still here that spoke. Thank you.